The text message wasn't even explicit, just a simple, "See you tonight," from Paolo Moretti. But the moment it lit up Aurora Romano's phone during her morning briefing with Francesco Vitelli, everything changed. The temperature in his penthouse office plummeted. His jaw tightened. And for the first time in 6 months of working together, Francesco looked at her like she belonged to him, had always belonged to him. What came next shattered every professional boundary they'd built. If you want to know how a single text message can detonate a man's carefully maintained control, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Aurora Romano had learned to read Francesco Vitelli the way sailors read storm clouds, carefully, from a distance, with healthy respect for what might happen if she miscalculated. 6 months of working as his private consultant had taught her that much. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. When Francesco wanted something, the air itself seemed to rearrange around his intentions. This morning, she'd arrived at his penthouse office at exactly 8:45, the way she always did. 15 minutes early. Never rushed. The elevator had delivered her to the top floor of the Vitelli Tower with its characteristic smoothness, and she'd walked past the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city with her laptop bag slung over one shoulder and her second coffee of the day going cold in her hand. Francesco's assistant, a sharp-eyed woman named Carlotta, who seemed to know everything about everyone, had waved her through without the usual pleasantries. That should have been Aurora's first warning. The second warning came when she opened the door to Francesco's office and found him standing at the window instead of sitting behind his desk. His hands were clasped behind his back, his shoulders rigid beneath the perfect lines of his charcoal suit. He didn't turn around when she entered. "Good morning," Aurora said, keeping her voice level. Professional. The same tone she'd used for 6 months of twice-weekly meetings, project updates, and the occasional late-night call when Francesco needed her analysis on something that couldn't wait until morning. "Close the door." Not "good morning," not "Señorita Romano," which was what he always called her. A formal distance built into 2 words that reminded both of them exactly where the lines were drawn. Aurora closed the door. The click of the latch sounded too loud in the silence. "Is everything all right?" she asked, setting her bag down on one of the leather chairs that faced his desk. The desk she'd spent an embarrassing amount of time thinking about late at night, when her brain refused to shut down and her body refused to cooperate with her strict policy of keeping work and fantasy in separate boxes. Francesco finally turned around. His face was unreadable, the same controlled mask he wore in every meeting, every negotiation, every interaction that required him to be Francesco Vitelli, CEO and power broker, instead of whoever he was when no one was watching. But something in his eyes was different, sharper, almost predatory. "Sit," he said. It wasn't a request. Aurora sat, crossing her legs and pulling out her laptop with movements she'd practiced into muscle memory. Professional, composed, absolutely not thinking about the way Francesco's gaze tracked her hands as she powered up the computer. "I have the revised projections for the Rotterdam deal," she began, opening the file she'd spent most of yesterday refining. "The numbers look better than we anticipated, especially if we can lock in the—" "Who is Paolo Moretti?" Aurora's fingers froze over the keyboard. She looked up slowly, her mind racing through possibilities, connections, reasons why Francesco would know that name. Because he shouldn't know that name. Paolo was separate, completely outside the carefully maintained boundaries of her professional life. "I'm sorry," she said, buying time. Francesco's expression didn't change. "Paolo Moretti. You had dinner with him twice last week, drinks on Friday. He texted you approximately—" Francesco glanced at his watch. 4 minutes ago." The coffee in Aurora's stomach turned to acid. "Are you having me followed?" "Answer the question." "That's none of your business." The words came out sharper than she'd intended, but she didn't take them back. Couldn't take them back. Because if she started explaining Paolo, started justifying why she'd gone out with a charming stockbroker who made her laugh and didn't look at her like she was a problem to be solved, then she was admitting Francesco had the right to ask. And he didn't. He was her client, nothing more. Except that wasn't quite true, was it? Because clients didn't memorize the exact timing of text messages. Clients didn't look at her the way Francesco was looking at her now, like he was considering multiple courses of action and none of them involved maintaining professional distance. Aurora. Her name in his mouth was different than Señorita Romano. Rougher, almost possessive. Answer the question. He's someone I've been seeing casually, she said, meeting Francesco's gaze directly because she refused to act like she'd done something wrong. Not that it's relevant to the Rotterdam deal or anything else we're working on. Casually. Yes. How casually? Francesco? How casually? Aurora's phone buzzed on the arm of her chair. She glanced down automatically. Another text from Paolo, probably wondering why she hadn't responded to the first one, and that was her mistake. Because when she looked back up, Francesco had moved. He was standing in front of her chair now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that she'd been trying not to notice for 6 months. "Give me your phone," he said quietly. "Absolutely not. Aurora, you're being completely unreasonable. Give me your phone." Something in his voice made her hand move before her brain caught up. She picked up the phone, thumb hovering over the power button, ready to shut him down. But Francesco's hand closed over hers, warm, firm, large enough to engulf her fingers completely, and the contact sent electricity straight up her arm. "Don't," he said, and there was something almost desperate underneath the command. "Please." That please shouldn't have affected her. It was just a word. But hearing it from Francesco Vitelli, a man who could buy entire companies with a phone call, who commanded respect and fear in equal measure, who never asked for anything he didn't expect to receive, felt like watching a crack form in bulletproof glass. Aurora let him take the phone. He read the messages with an expression that grew progressively darker. Paolo's texts were innocent enough, making plans for dinner, asking about her day, the kind of casual conversation that people who were dating but not committed tended to have. But Francesco read them like they were evidence in a criminal trial. "You're going to see him tonight," Francesco said. Not a question. "I was planning to, yes. Cancel it?" "Excuse me?" Francesco set the phone down on his desk, too carefully, like he was restraining himself from throwing it through the window. "Cancel your plans with Paolo Moretti. You're not seeing him again." Aurora stood up, anger finally burning through the shock. "You don't get to tell me who I can see. He's using you. You don't know anything about him." "I know everything about him." Francesco's voice was still quiet, but there was steel underneath now. "I know he works for Castellano Investment Group. I know he approached you at Moretti's wine bar on March 15th. I know he accidentally spilled your drink and bought you a replacement. I know he asked you out 3 times before you said yes. And I know exactly why he targeted you." The room seemed to tilt. "Targeted?" "He didn't find you by accident, Aurora. He was sent." "That's insane." "Is it?" Francesco moved closer, close enough that Aurora could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. "You're my consultant. You have access to confidential information about my business dealings. You attend meetings with my associates. You know things that certain people would pay very well to learn. And Paolo Moretti works for a firm that has been trying to get leverage on me for the better part of a year." Aurora's mind was racing, trying to find holes in his logic, trying to remember details from her dates with Paolo that would prove Francesco wrong. But the memories were suddenly suspicious. The questions Paolo had asked about her work, the way he'd always seemed interested when she mentioned client meetings, the casual inquiries about her schedule. "You're paranoid," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm careful." Francesco's hand came up, hovering near her face like he wanted to touch her, but was holding himself back. "There's a difference. Even if you're right, even if Paolo approached me because of you, that doesn't give you the right to control my personal life. You think this is about control? What else would it be?" Francesco laughed, a short, harsh sound that had nothing to do with humor. "Aurora, I have spent 6 months watching you walk into my office twice a week. 6 months listening to you analyze contracts and dissect business strategies with that sharp mind of yours. 6 months memorizing the way you take your coffee, black with 1 sugar, but only in the morning, straight black in the afternoon. 6 months noticing that you bite your bottom lip when you're concentrating and that you tap your pen against your notebook when you disagree with something but you're being too polite to say so. 6 months of maintaining professional distance while every instinct I have has been screaming at me to—" He cut himself off, jaw clenching. To what? Aurora whispered. Francesco's eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw past the control, saw the want, the possessiveness, the barely restrained hunger that he'd been hiding behind Señorita Romano and business meetings and carefully maintained boundaries. To make sure everyone knows you're mine, he said quietly, including you. Aurora's breath caught. Her pulse was hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat, her wrists, the base of her spine. This was dangerous. This was crossing every line they'd established. This was Francesco Vitelli looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, and her traitorous body was responding like it had been waiting for this moment since the first time she'd walked into his office. "I'm not yours," she said, but her voice came out breathless. "I'm your consultant." "You stopped being just my consultant the moment I realized I couldn't focus in meetings because I was too busy wondering if you were thinking about me the way I think about you. And how do you think about me?" It was a challenge, maybe even a dare. Aurora had spent 6 months pretending she didn't fantasize about this man, about this office, about scenarios that would get her fired from any normal corporate environment. But nothing about Francesco Vitelli was normal. Constantly, Francesco said, obsessively, in ways that would make you run if I said them out loud. "Try me." The words were out before Aurora could stop them. Francesco's eyes darkened. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her skin, and Aurora felt that small touch everywhere. "I think about you sitting on my desk," he said quietly, his accent thickening the way it did when he was angry or, apparently, aroused. "Right here, where you put your laptop every week. I think about pushing all these papers aside and finding out if you taste as good as I imagine. I think about making you forget every other man who's ever touched you. And I think about making sure Paolo Moretti and anyone else who even looks at you knows exactly who you belong to." Aurora should step back, should remind him about professional boundaries and inappropriate workplace conduct and all the very good reasons why this was a terrible idea. But her body wasn't listening to her brain. Her body was leaning into Francesco's touch, arching toward the hand that had slid from her ear to cup her jaw. "That's insane," she breathed. "Probably. You barely acknowledge me in meetings. Because if I let myself acknowledge you the way I want to, we'd never get any work done." "This is a bad idea." "Terrible idea," Francesco agreed, his thumb brushing across her bottom lip. "Tell me to stop." Aurora opened her mouth, but the word "stop" refused to form. Instead, she heard herself say, "Prove it." "Prove what?" "That Paolo targeted me. That he's not just a guy who thinks I'm attractive and wanted to take me to dinner. Prove that you're not just jealous." Something dangerous flashed in Francesco's eyes. "You want proof?" "Yes." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and held it up to show her. It was an email chain, recent, from this morning, between someone named Castellano and Paolo Moretti. Aurora's name appeared multiple times. So did phrases like making progress, gaining trust, and potential access to Vitelli contracts. The coffee Aurora had drunk earlier threatened to come back up. "When did you get this? 20 minutes before you arrived? And you waited until now to tell me?" "I needed to see your face when you read his text. Needed to know if you were involved." "You thought I was spying on you?" Aurora stepped back, anger flooding through her. "You thought I was, what, sleeping with you for information?" I didn't know what to think. Francesco's control was fracturing now, his accent thick with emotion. "All I knew was that a man I've never trusted was getting close to the only person who—" He stopped, jaw working. "The only person who what?" "Who matters," Francesco said roughly. "The only person who matters." The admission hung in the air between them, too big to take back, too honest to ignore. Aurora's hands were shaking, her whole body was shaking. Because this wasn't just attraction anymore. This wasn't just 6 months of professional tension finally snapping. This was Francesco Vitelli, a man who controlled everything and trusted no one, admitting that she mattered, that she'd gotten under his skin the same way he'd gotten under hers. "I need to cancel my date," Aurora said quietly. Francesco went very still. "You believe me?" "I believe you think Paolo is a threat. Whether he actually is—" She pulled out her phone, pulling up Paolo's contact information. Her finger hovered over the screen. "If I do this, if I block him, if I choose to believe you, What happens next? Next, Francesco said carefully, you let me take you to dinner. Somewhere public. Somewhere normal. And we figure out if this thing between us is just chemistry or something more. And if it's just chemistry, then we'll have had one very expensive dinner and a good story. And if it's something more, Francesco's hand came up to cup her face again, and this time Aurora leaned into it without hesitation. Then you need to understand what you're signing up for. My life isn't normal, Aurora. My business isn't entirely legitimate. The people I associate with operate in gray areas that most people don't even know exist. And if you choose to be with me, if you choose this, then those gray areas become yours too. Is that supposed to scare me off? It's supposed to give you all the information. I won't lie to you, not about this. Aurora looked at her phone, at Paolo's messages, at the dinner plans they'd made for tonight. Then she looked at Francesco, at the man who'd been watching her for 6 months, memorizing her coffee order and the way she bit her lip, holding himself back because he understood the weight of what he was offering. She blocked Paolo's number. The action felt final, irreversible, like stepping off a cliff and trusting that Francesco would catch her. Okay, she said quietly. Dinner. Francesco's whole body seemed to relax, like he'd been holding his breath. Tonight, 7 o'clock. I'll pick you up. I can meet you. I'll pick you up, Francesco repeated, his hand sliding from her face to the back of her neck. This is a date, Aurora, a real one, which means I pick you up, I pay for dinner, and I make sure you get home safely afterward. Safely, Aurora repeated, something warm unfurling in her chest. Is that a promise? Always. The word was simple. The weight behind it wasn't, because Francesco wasn't just promising to keep her safe tonight. He was promising to keep her safe from whatever came next, from Paolo, from Castellano, from the gray areas he'd warned her about. And Aurora, who'd spent 6 months maintaining professional distance and pretending she didn't want exactly this, felt something inside her shift and settle. I should go, she said, even though leaving was the last thing she wanted to do. I have another client meeting at 10. Francesco's thumb traced small circles against the base of her skull. Cancel it. I can't just cancel it. Stay. Francesco, please. That word again, rough and honest and impossible to resist. Stay. We'll talk about Rotterdam, about the projections you spent all day working on, about everything except Paolo Moretti and what I want to do to you on this desk. Aurora laughed, surprised and slightly breathless. You're terrible at selling this. I'm not selling anything. I'm asking you to stay. So she stayed. They talked about Rotterdam, about projections and contracts and timelines. They ordered lunch from the Italian place on the corner that Francesco liked. They argued about risk assessment and market volatility and whether the deal was worth the exposure. And through it all, Aurora felt the shift between them, the way Francesco's hand would brush hers when he reached for a document, the way his eyes would linger on her face when he thought she wasn't looking, the way the air felt charged with possibility. By the time Aurora finally left at 4 o'clock, she'd rescheduled 2 meetings and completely lost track of her normal routine. But she didn't care, because tonight she had a date with Francesco Vitelli, and everything was about to change. She just didn't realize how much. Aurora spent 2 hours getting ready, longer than she'd spent on any date in the past year. She changed outfits 3 times, settled on a black dress that was elegant without being formal, sexy without being obvious. She left her hair down, the way Francesco seemed to like it. She kept her makeup simple, and when the buzzer rang at exactly 7 o'clock, her heart was pounding hard enough that she had to take 3 deep breaths before answering. Francesco stood in her doorway in dark jeans and a black sweater that did absolutely unfair things to his shoulders. He'd ditched the suit, the corporate armor, and what was left was somehow more dangerous, more real. Hi, Aurora said, suddenly nervous. Hi. Francesco's gaze traveled over her slowly, appreciatively. You look incredible. So do you. Ready? Aurora grabbed her purse, locked her apartment, and let Francesco guide her to the elevator with his hand warm against the small of her back. The touch felt possessive, grounding, like he was already claiming her in small ways, testing boundaries, seeing how far she'd let him go. The car waiting outside was sleek and expensive, a dark sedan with tinted windows and a driver who didn't ask questions. Francesco held the door open, waited until Aurora was settled, then slid in beside her close enough that their thighs touched. "Where are we going?" Aurora asked as the car pulled into traffic. "Somewhere we can talk without interruption." That should have been ominous. It should have set off alarm bells. But Aurora found she didn't care. She'd made her choice when she blocked Paolo's number. Everything else was just details. The restaurant was on the waterfront, small, exclusive, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. The maitre d' greeted Francesco by name, led them to a corner table with a view of the water, and disappeared without taking drink orders. Apparently Francesco had already taken care of that. "Do you always plan everything in advance?" Aurora asked, settling into her chair. "When it matters." Francesco's gaze held hers across the table. "And this matters." A waiter appeared with wine, red, expensive, probably older than Aurora, and poured 2 glasses before vanishing again. "So," Aurora said, taking a sip, "tell me about the parts of your business that aren't entirely legitimate." Francesco's lips quirked. "Straight to it?" "You promised honesty. I'm holding you to it." "Fair enough." He leaned back in his chair, the picture of casual control. "Most of my business is legal. Investments, real estate, consulting, but I also broker deals between parties who prefer to operate outside traditional channels. I facilitate connections. I make problems disappear. And in return, I receive favors, information, and leverage that I can use when needed. Like getting Paolo's emails. Is that what you did to him? Made him disappear?" Francesco's expression didn't change. "Paolo Moretti resigned from Castellano Investment Group this afternoon. He'll be relocating to their Singapore office next week. He won't be contacting you again." Aurora set down her wine glass carefully. "Did you threaten him?" "I explained the situation." "Francesco, he made a choice, Aurora. He could continue working for Castellano and face the consequences of targeting you, or he could accept a generous severance package and start fresh somewhere else. He chose the second option. And if he hadn't, then I would have made the choice for him." The casual certainty in Francesco's voice should have scared her, should have sent her running out of the restaurant and straight back to her normal, uncomplicated life. But Aurora found she was more curious than afraid. "How long have you been doing this?" she asked. "Which part?" "All of it. The brokering, the favors, the—" She gestured vaguely. "The thing you do that isn't quite legal but isn't quite illegal either. My family has been in this business for 3 generations. I inherited more than just money when my father died. I inherited obligations, alliances, enemies." Francesco took a sip of his wine. "I've been managing it all since I was 23. That's young. It was necessary." The waiter returned with appetizers Aurora didn't remember ordering. She picked at the food, her appetite lost somewhere between made him disappear and the realization that she was sitting across from a man who operated in a world she'd only read about in novels. "You can leave," Francesco said quietly. "Right now. I'll have my driver take you home. We'll go back to being professional acquaintances. I won't contact you outside of work. And Paolo will stay in Singapore where he can't hurt you." "Is that what you want?" "What I want is irrelevant. This is about what you can handle." Aurora met his gaze directly. "What if I can handle more than you think? Then you're either braver or more foolish than I gave you credit for." "Maybe both." Francesco's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Tell me something, Aurora. What were you thinking about during our meetings? All those times you were staring at my desk?" Heat flooded Aurora's face. "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Liar." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You think I didn't notice? The way your breathing would change when I stood too close? The way you'd press your thighs together when I leaned over your shoulder to look at your computer? I noticed everything, Cara. Every single thing." The endearment in Italian sent shivers down Aurora's spine. "You're very sure of yourself." "I'm sure of what I see. And what I see is a woman who's been fantasizing about me as much as I've been fantasizing about her." "That's presumptuous." "Then tell me I'm wrong." Aurora couldn't, because he wasn't wrong. He was absolutely, completely right, and they both knew it. "This is insane," she said instead. 6 months of professional distance, and now we're, what, dating? Now we're being honest about what we want. And what do you want, Francesco?" He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I want you in my life, in my bed, in my world. I want every man who looks at you to know you're mine. I want to wake up next to you and fall asleep with you and everything in between, and I want you to choose this, choose me, knowing exactly what you're getting into. Aurora's pulse was racing. And if I can't handle it, then I'll let you go. His thumb traced circles on her palm. But I don't think that's going to be a problem. Why not? Because you're still here. Because you blocked Paolo without hesitation. Because you're looking at me right now like you want me to drag you out of this restaurant and finish what we started in my office this morning. Aurora pulled her hand back, needing distance to think. You're very confident. I'm very observant. Same thing. Not quite. They finished dinner in a haze of tension and conversation that felt like foreplay. Francesco told her stories about growing up in his family's business, carefully edited, Aurora suspected, but honest in the ways that mattered. She told him about her childhood, her career path, the reasons she'd become a consultant instead of joining a firm. And through it all, the pull between them grew stronger, more undeniable, until Aurora could barely focus on her food. When the check came, or rather, when the waiter informed them that everything had been taken care of, Francesco stood and offered his hand. Walk with me? The waterfront was quiet at this hour, the city lights reflecting off the dark water. Francesco kept his hand on Aurora's lower back as they walked, the touch grounding and possessive in equal measure. They didn't talk, didn't need to. The silence between them felt full of possibility, of choices being made and boundaries being crossed and futures being written. I should take you home, Francesco said finally, but he didn't move toward the car. You should, Aurora agreed, but she didn't move either. Aurora! She kissed him, rose up on her toes, fisted her hands in his sweater, and kissed him with 6 months of pent-up wanting and denial and need. Francesco made a sound low in his throat, surprise or satisfaction or both, and his arms came around her, pulling her flush against him as he took control of the kiss, deepening it until Aurora forgot where she was, forgot everything except the taste of him and the feel of his hands on her body and the way her name sounded when he groaned it against her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Francesco rested his forehead against hers. My place or yours? He asked roughly. Yours. Because going to his place felt like stepping fully into his world, and Aurora was done with half measures. The drive back to Francesco's penthouse was a blur of heated glances and restraint stretched thin. His hand stayed on her thigh the entire time, thumb drawing maddening circles that made Aurora want to forget about the driver and climb into Francesco's lap, right there in the back seat. But she held herself still, held herself together, until the car stopped and Francesco was guiding her into his private elevator with barely leashed urgency. The moment the elevator doors closed, Francesco had her against the wall, his mouth on hers, his hands everywhere. Aurora met him kiss for kiss, touch for touch, 6 months of professional distance burning away in the heat between them. When the elevator dinged at his floor, they stumbled out still tangled together, leaving a trail of Aurora's purse and Francesco's jacket on the way to his bedroom. And then there were no more barriers, no more distance, no more pretending this was anything other than what it had always been. Inevitable, consuming, and absolutely worth the risk. Hours later, Aurora lay in Francesco's bed with the city lights painting patterns across his ceiling and Francesco's arm around her waist, his chest solid against her back. She should feel scared, should feel uncertain about what came next, but all she felt was claimed, safe, completely and irrevocably seen. No regrets? Francesco asked quietly, his breath warm against her ear. Aurora laced her fingers through his. Ask me again in the morning. And if you have regrets then I'll deal with them. But right now? She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze in the darkness. Right now, I'm exactly where I want to be. Francesco pulled her closer, and Aurora felt the tension leave his body. Good. This is going to complicate everything, isn't it? Probably. Your business, my career, everything. Definitely. Aurora should be more concerned about that. Should be planning exit strategies and damage control. But Francesco's hand was tracing lazy patterns on her spine, and his heartbeat was steady beneath her palm, and for the first time in 6 months, Aurora let herself stop thinking and just feel. Tomorrow, she'd worry about Paolo and Castellano and what it meant to be involved with a man who operated in moral gray areas. Tomorrow, she'd figure out how to navigate being both Francesco's consultant and something infinitely more complicated. But tonight she was just Aurora, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd spent 6 months memorizing her coffee order and fighting his own instincts. And that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Morning arrived with the kind of brightness that felt like an accusation. Aurora woke to sunlight slicing through floor-to-ceiling windows she didn't recognize, tangled in sheets that cost more than her monthly rent, with Francesco's arms still locked around her waist, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. She didn't move, didn't want to break whatever spell had carried them through the night. But her phone was buzzing somewhere in the wreckage of discarded clothes, and reality had a way of reasserting itself whether you were ready or not. Francesco stirred behind her, his grip tightening reflexively before he seemed to register where they were, what they'd done, the weight of all the boundaries they'd obliterated in the span of 12 hours. "Your phone," he murmured against her shoulder, voice rough with sleep. "Ignore it." "Aurora, just a few more minutes." She pressed back against him, feeling the immediate response of his body, the way his breathing changed. "Please." That word again, the one that seemed to undo both of them. But the phone kept buzzing, insistent and shrill, until Francesco finally released her with obvious reluctance. Aurora stumbled out of bed, naked and unselfconscious in the morning light, and dug through the pile of clothes until she found her phone. 15 missed calls, all from the same number. Her business partner, Marcus Chen. "Shit," Aurora breathed. "What's wrong?" "I have a presentation, today, 9 o'clock. She checked the time, 7:45. "I completely forgot." Francesco sat up, sheets pooling around his waist, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "What kind of presentation?" "New client pitch. Major account. Marcus has been working on it for weeks, and I promised I'd—" She cut herself off, already pulling on her dress from last night, looking for her shoes. "I need to go home. I need to change. I need to—" "Breathe," Francesco said, standing and crossing to her in 3 strides. His hand settled on her shoulders, warm and grounding. "Breathe, Cara. You have time." "I don't. Marcus is going to kill me. I've never missed a pitch meeting. Never. And now I'm going to show up looking like I spent the night." She stopped, meeting Francesco's gaze. "Like I spent the night exactly where I spent it." Something flickered in his expression. "Do you regret it?" "What? No. God, no." Aurora pressed her palm against his chest, feeling his heartbeat beneath her hand. "But I can't lose this client because I was too distracted to remember my own schedule." Francesco's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "I'll have my driver take you home. You'll make it in time." "Thank you." "Aurora." He caught her hand before she could pull away. "Tonight, dinner again. Here, I'll cook." "You cook?" "I'm full of surprises." Despite everything, the panic, the rushing, the creeping awareness that she'd just torpedoed her carefully maintained work-life balance, Aurora smiled. "Okay. Tonight." The kiss he gave her was thorough enough to make her forget about Marcus and presentations and everything except the taste of Francesco's mouth and the possessive way his hands gripped her hips. When he finally released her, Aurora's carefully reconstructed composure was in shambles again. "Go," Francesco said roughly, "before I decide to make you stay." Aurora went. The driver, a silent man named Luca, who'd apparently been waiting since dawn, got her home in 20 minutes. She showered in record time, changed into her standard pitch meeting armor of tailored pants and a silk blouse, and made it to Marcus's office, with 3 minutes to spare. Marcus took one look at her and raised an eyebrow. "Rough night?" "Traffic," Aurora lied. "Uh-huh. And that's why you're wearing the same earrings you had on yesterday?" Aurora's hand flew to her ear. Damn. She'd been in such a rush she hadn't even thought to change jewelry. "Marcus, save it." But he was smiling, that knowing smile that said he'd figured out exactly what kind of night she'd had. "We'll talk about your mysterious disappearing act later. Right now, we need to nail this presentation or Chen Romano Consulting is going to have a very bad quarter." The meeting was brutal. The potential client, a tech startup with more money than sense, asked impossible questions, demanded unrealistic timelines, and generally behaved like the kind of entitled nightmare that made Aurora question her career choices. But she and Marcus had been doing this long enough to know how to handle difficult clients. They tag-teamed the presentation, deflected the worst questions, and by the time they walked out 2 hours later, they had a signed contract and a deposit check that would keep their business afloat for the next 6 months. "Drinks," Marcus announced as soon as they were back in his office. "We're celebrating, and you're going to tell me everything." "There's nothing to tell. Aurora Romano, I've known you for 8 years. I've seen you turn down dates with professional athletes and literal billionaires because you were too focused on work. And now you're showing up to pitch meetings with sex hair and the same jewelry from yesterday. So either you got abducted by aliens who scrambled your priorities, or you finally slept with that Italian client you've been obsessing over for the past 6 months." Aurora sank into one of Marcus's guest chairs, the adrenaline from the presentation finally wearing off and leaving her wrung out. "It's complicated. It's always complicated with you." Marcus poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass and slid it across his desk. "Talk." So Aurora talked. She told him about Paolo, about the emails, about Francesco's confession in his office. She left out some of the more explicit details. Marcus didn't need to know about the desk fantasy or exactly how the night had ended, but she gave him enough to understand the situation. Marcus listened without interrupting, his expression growing progressively more concerned. When she finished, he took a long drink of his own whiskey. "Okay," he said finally, "let me see if I have this straight. Your client, the client who accounts for roughly 30% of our annual revenue, has been obsessed with you for 6 months. He had the guy you were dating investigated, got access to his private emails, and then essentially blackmailed him into leaving the country. And your response to all of this was to sleep with him." Put like that, it sounded insane. "You're not wrong," Aurora admitted. "Aurora, I love you, but what the hell were you thinking?" "I wasn't thinking, that's the point." She drained her whiskey, welcoming the burn. "For once in my life, I just wanted to feel something without analyzing it to death first." "And how's that working out for you?" "I don't know yet." Aurora set down the glass. "Ask me again in a week." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You're falling for him." "I barely know him." That's not an answer. It wasn't. Because the truth was, Aurora didn't know what she felt. The night with Francesco had been incredible, better than any fantasy she'd constructed during those long months of professional distance. But in the cold light of day, with Marcus looking at her like she'd lost her mind, Aurora couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped off a cliff without checking if there was ground below. "Just be careful," Marcus said quietly. "Men like Francesco Vitelli don't operate by the same rules as the rest of us. And when you're involved with someone like that, you don't just risk your heart. You risk everything." Aurora knew he was right. Knew she should be more cautious, more careful, more aware of the danger she was walking into. But when her phone buzzed with a text from Francesco, just 3 words, "Thinking about you," she felt that same pull, that same inevitability that had led her to his bed last night. She texted back, "What are you thinking?" The response came immediately. "Things that would get me arrested if I said them in public." Despite everything, Aurora smiled. The rest of the day passed in a blur of client calls and contract reviews. Aurora tried to focus, tried to push thoughts of Francesco to the back of her mind, but it was impossible. Every time her phone buzzed, her pulse jumped. Every time she closed her eyes, she could feel his hands on her skin, hear his voice in her ear saying her name like a prayer and a curse combined. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, Aurora was wound so tight she could barely think straight. She went home, changed into jeans and a soft sweater, casual, comfortable, the kind of thing she never would have worn to a business meeting, but that felt right for whatever tonight was going to be, and waited for Francesco's text telling her his driver was downstairs. It came at 7 on the dot. Luca drove her back to Francesco's penthouse in silence. The elevator ride up felt longer than it had that morning, Aurora's nerves ratcheting tighter with each passing floor. By the time the doors opened directly into Francesco's apartment, her hands were shaking. Francesco was in the kitchen, an open, modern space that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread, wearing dark jeans and a white button-down with the sleeves rolled up. He looked up when she entered, and the smile that crossed his face was pure, unfiltered want. "Hi," Aurora said, suddenly shy. "Hi." Francesco crossed to her, pulling her into a kiss that tasted like wine and promise. How was your day? Insane. Yours? Long. I couldn't stop thinking about this morning. Just this morning? His hand slid down to her hips. And last night. And what I want to do to you right now instead of cooking dinner. Aurora laughed, pushing against his chest. You promised to cook. I did. Doesn't mean I'm happy about it. He released her reluctantly and returned to the kitchen, where something that smelled incredible was simmering on the stove. Aurora perched on one of the bar stools, watching him move around the space with the same controlled precision he brought to everything else. So, she said, accepting the glass of wine he poured for her, tell me something I don't know about you. Francesco glanced at her, amused. That's a dangerous question. I like danger, apparently. Apparently, he stirred whatever was in the pot. Pasta sauce, Aurora realized, homemade and rich with the scent of tomatoes and herbs. What do you want to know? Everything. Everything is a lot. Start small then. Why did you really wait 6 months to make a move? Francesco was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Because I knew once I started, I wouldn't be able to stop, and I wasn't sure you were ready for that. And now? Now, I'm hoping you are. Because I meant what I said last night, Aurora. I want you in my life, all the way in, and that means dealing with parts of my world that aren't pretty or safe or easy to explain. As if on cue, Francesco's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted, hardening into something Aurora had only seen in business meetings when negotiations weren't going his way. I need to take this, he said. Okay, Francesco answered in rapid Italian, his voice clipped and controlled. Aurora couldn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. Anger, barely leashed, and something that might have been concern. He paced to the window, his free hand clenched into a fist at his side, and Aurora watched the muscles in his shoulders tense beneath his shirt. The call lasted 3 minutes. When Francesco hung up, he stood at the window for a long moment before turning back to her. Problem? Aurora asked. Nothing I can't handle. Francesco, it's business, cara. Nothing for you to worry about. But Aurora could see the lie in the tightness around his eyes, the way his jaw was locked. You said you wouldn't lie to me. I'm not lying. You're not telling me the truth either. Francesco crossed back to the kitchen, turning off the burner with more force than necessary. Paolo Moretti didn't go to Singapore. Aurora's stomach dropped. What? He's still in the city, and according to my source, he's been asking questions about you. What kind of questions? Where you live, who you're seeing, whether you've been back to Moretti's wine bar. Francesco's hands gripped the edge of the counter. He's not letting this go, Aurora, and that means Castellano isn't letting it go either. So what do we do? We? Francesco looked at her sharply. There is no we in this. This is my problem to handle. Except it's not just your problem anymore, is it? You made it my problem when you told me Paolo was targeting me. I told you so you could protect yourself, not so you could get more involved. Aurora slid off the bar stool, anger flaring hot and bright. I'm already involved, Francesco. I blocked a guy I was dating because you told me he was using me. I slept with you knowing full well what kind of world you operate in. So don't stand there and tell me I'm not part of this. You don't understand what you're saying. Then explain it to me. Castellano is not someone you cross lightly, Aurora. He's powerful, connected, and he doesn't forget grudges. If he thinks you're important to me, if he thinks you're leverage he can use, then you become a target, and I will not let that happen. So what? I'm just supposed to go back to my normal life and pretend none of this happened? Yes. The single word hit like a slap. Aurora stared at Francesco, at the man who'd spent last night worshiping her body and this morning promising her tonight, and felt something crack in her chest. You're serious, she said quietly. Completely. Last night you told me you wanted me in your life. This morning you said you'd cook me dinner, and now you're telling me to walk away because things got complicated. I'm telling you to walk away because I can't guarantee your safety if you stay. I didn't ask for guarantees. Well, I'm giving them to you anyway. Francesco's voice was rough, strained. I've already put you in danger by letting this happen. I won't make it worse by being selfish enough to keep you here. Aurora felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. So that's it? One night and you're done? It has to be. Bullshit. The word came out sharp, cutting. You're scared. You're scared that if something happens to me, it'll be your fault. But pushing me away doesn't protect me, Francesco. It just makes you feel like you're in control. You're wrong. Am I? Aurora moved closer, close enough to see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the way his hands were white-knuckled on the counter. Because from where I'm standing, this looks a lot like a man who's terrified of actually letting someone in. You don't know what you're talking about. Then tell me I'm wrong. Tell me you don't want me here. Tell me last night meant nothing and that you can walk away without a second thought. Francesco's eyes met hers, and Aurora saw the war happening behind them, want battling with fear, desire fighting against whatever instinct was telling him to push her away. For a moment, she thought he might actually do it, might actually tell her to leave and close the door on whatever this was between them. Instead, his control shattered. Francesco closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face, his mouth crashing against hers with bruising intensity. Aurora kissed him back just as hard, pouring all her frustration and fear and want into the contact, her hands fisting in his shirt to pull him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Francesco pressed his forehead against hers. "I can't do this," he said roughly. "Yes, you can." "Aurora, I'm not afraid of Castellano. I'm not afraid of Paolo. And I'm sure as hell not afraid of you." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "But if you tell me to leave right now, if you push me away because you think it's what's best for me, then I will walk out that door and I won't come back. So you need to decide, Francesco, right now. Are you brave enough to let me stay?" The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Aurora could see Francesco processing it, weighing options, calculating risks the way he probably calculated everything. And for a terrible moment, she thought he was going to choose wrong. Then his hands tightened on her face, and he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, like he was memorizing the taste of her. "Stay," he breathed against her mouth. "Please, stay." Relief flooded through Aurora, so intense it made her knees weak. "Okay. But we do this my way. You don't go anywhere alone. You don't meet anyone I haven't vetted. And if I tell you something is dangerous, you listen." "Francesco, that's the deal, Aurora. Take it or leave it." She should argue, should push back against the controlling edge in his voice, but Aurora recognized the fear underneath the command, the desperate need to keep her safe, and she couldn't bring herself to fight him on it. "Fine," she said. "Your way." "Thank you." They ate dinner on the couch. The pasta forgotten and reheated, the wine flowing freely, the tension between them shifting from confrontation to something more complicated. Francesco told her stories about his father, about growing up in a family where business and danger were inseparable. Aurora told him about her parents' divorce, about building Chen Romano Consulting from nothing, about the drive that had led her to success and solitude in equal measure. By the time midnight rolled around, Aurora was curled against Francesco's side, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting on his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, grounding, real. "I should go home," she murmured, not moving. "Stay." "Francesco, stay, Aurora. Let me wake up next to you again." So she stayed. They fell asleep on the couch, tangled together, the city lights painting patterns across the windows and the weight of unspoken promises hanging in the air between them. Aurora woke to Francesco's phone ringing. Again. He answered it with a curse, his voice sharp and alert despite the early hour. Aurora couldn't understand the Italian, but she understood the urgency in his tone. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "What's wrong?" Aurora asked, sitting up. "Paolo was found dead 2 hours ago. Single gunshot wound. Police are calling it a robbery gone wrong." The room tilted. "What?" "He was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Or that's what it'll look like when the investigation wraps up." Aurora's blood went cold. "Did you?" "No." Francesco's voice was flat. "But Castellano might think I did, which means this situation just got significantly more complicated." "What do we do? Right now?" "Nothing. We wait to see how Castellano reacts. If he thinks I had Paolo killed, he'll retaliate. If he realizes it was someone else taking advantage of the situation..." Francesco trailed off, his jaw tight. "Someone else? Who else would want Paolo dead?" Aurora, Paolo wasn't just working for Castellano. He was in debt to some very dangerous people. People who don't forgive and don't forget. Francesco stood pacing to the window. His death could be exactly what it looks like. Bad luck and worse timing. Or it could be a message. A message to who? To me. To Castellano. To anyone else who thought Paolo Moretti was useful leverage. He turned back to her, and Aurora saw something in his expression that made her stomach clench. Either way, you're not safe here. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the fact that every person who knows about you and me is now calculating how they can use that information. Castellano will assume I had something to do with Paolo's death, and if he wants revenge, the easiest way to hurt me is through you. So we go to the police. And tell them what? That my business rival might have had a man killed who was also spying on you at said rival's request? Francesco's laugh was bitter. The police can't help with this, Cara. This is my world, and the only way to keep you safe is to make sure everyone knows that touching you means declaring war on me. Aurora stood on shaking legs. How do you do that? By making you visible. By making our relationship public enough that anyone who goes after you knows exactly what they're starting. Francesco crossed back to her, his hands settling on her shoulders. I need to take you to an event tomorrow night. A charity gala. Very public, very visible. Half the people there will be legitimate business contacts. The other half, he trailed off meaningfully. The other half will be the people you broker deals with. Yes, and if I go with you, if I let you parade me around in front of them, that makes me a target. It makes you protected. There's a difference. Aurora wanted to argue, wanted to point out that being protected in Francesco's world seemed to involve a lot of dead bodies and dangerous calculations. But she also understood the logic. If she was just Francesco's consultant, she was expendable, a pawn someone could remove to send a message. But if she was Francesco's, publicly, undeniably his, then she became something else entirely. What happens if I say no? She asked quietly. Then I put you on a plane to somewhere safe. Somewhere Castellano and everyone else can't find you, and I handle this alone. And us? Francesco's hands tightened on her shoulders. There is no ease if you're halfway across the world, Aurora. It was an ultimatum dressed up as a choice. Stay and become part of Francesco's public life, or leave and lose him entirely. Aurora knew she should be angry about the manipulation, the way he was backing her into a corner. But she also knew he was right. There was no middle ground here. No way to keep their relationship private and keep her safe at the same time. Okay, she said finally. I'll go. Relief flickered across Francesco's face. Thank you, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more secrets. No more handling things without telling me what's going on. If I'm stepping into your world, I need to know what I'm walking into. Francesco studied her for a long moment, and Aurora could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Then he nodded slowly. Agreed. No more secrets. Starting now. Starting now. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her waist. Paolo's death wasn't random, Aurora. Someone wanted him dead, and they wanted it to look like it could be connected to me, which means someone is trying to start a war between me and Castellano. Who would want that? Several people. Castellano has rivals who'd love to see him weakened. I have enemies who'd enjoy watching me deal with his retaliation. And there are always opportunists looking to profit from other people's conflicts. So what do? We attend the gala tomorrow. We make our relationship public. And we wait to see who makes the next move. Francesco's hand came up to cup her face. And while we're waiting, I keep you close. Very close. Aurora leaned into his touch, fear and desire tangling together in her chest. I'm scared. Good. Fear keeps you careful. Are you scared? Francesco's thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Terrified, but not of Castellano or whoever killed Paolo or any of the people who will be circling us tomorrow night. I'm scared of losing you now that I finally have you. The admission settled between them, raw and honest, and more vulnerable than anything Francesco had said before. Aurora rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. Trust and fear, and the growing certainty that she was falling for a man whose world might destroy them both. When they finally broke apart, Francesco rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow changes everything, he said quietly. I know. Once we walk into that gala together, there's no going back. Everyone will know, and some of them will try to use it against us. Then we make sure they fail. Francesco's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. We. I like the sound of that. Get used to it. You're stuck with me now. Promise? Promise. They spent the rest of the morning tangled together in Francesco's bed, the outside world temporarily forgotten. But reality had a way of intruding, and by noon, Francesco was fielding calls from associates who wanted to know his take on Paolo's death. Aurora listened to his side of the conversations, careful, controlled, giving nothing away, and understood with growing clarity exactly how good Francesco was at playing the game. He confirmed he'd heard about Paolo, but expressed appropriate surprise. He suggested that perhaps Paolo's gambling debts had finally caught up with him. He never once admitted that Paolo had been investigating her or that Francesco had forced him to resign. By the time the last call ended, Aurora's head was spinning. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "Like what?" "This careful, this calculated, every word measured and every response designed to give nothing away." Francesco set down his phone and pulled her against his chest. "In my world, yes. Words have weight, Aurora. One wrong phrase can start conflicts that take years to resolve. So you learn to be careful. You learn to say exactly what you mean and nothing more." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." "Is that why you like being with me? Because I don't operate that way?" Francesco was quiet for a moment, his hand tracing patterns on her spine. "I like being with you because you're the first person in years who makes me want to stop calculating, who makes me want to just feel." Aurora tilted her head back to look at him. "Is that a good thing or a bad thing?" "I don't know yet. Ask me after tomorrow night." Tomorrow night, the gala. The moment when Aurora would step fully into Francesco's world and let everyone see exactly what she meant to him. The thought sent equal parts anticipation and terror through her veins. "What should I wear?" she asked. Francesco's eyes darkened. "Something that'll make every man in that room wish he was me, and remind them why they're not." "Possessive much?" "Completely. Is that going to be a problem?" Aurora thought about it. About the way Francesco's hand stayed on her lower back when they walked, about the satisfied gleam in his eyes when she wore his marks on her skin, about the barely leashed hunger in his voice when he called her mine. "No," she said finally. "It's not a problem." "Good. Because tomorrow night, I'm going to make sure everyone knows you belong to me, and I'm not going to apologize for it." The promise in his words sent heat pooling low in Aurora's belly. She kissed him, hard and deep, and full of the same possessive need he'd just confessed to, and felt his response immediately. His hands tightened on her hips, pulling her closer, and whatever else they'd been about to discuss got lost in the tangle of sheets and skin and the desperate need to prove to each other that this, whatever this was real. Hours later, lying in the ruins of Francesco's bed, with the afternoon sun painting gold across the windows, Aurora felt the weight of tomorrow settling over her like a second skin. Tomorrow, she'd walk into a room full of people who operated by rules she didn't fully understand. Tomorrow, she'd let Francesco claim her publicly, irrevocably. Tomorrow, there would be no more hiding, no more pretending this was just physical or temporary or something she could walk away from when it got too complicated. Tomorrow, Aurora Romano would become Francesco Vitelli's, and there was absolutely no going back from that. The dress arrived at noon in a black box with Francesco's name embossed in silver on the lid. Aurora opened it in her apartment. She'd insisted on going home to prepare, needing space to breathe before stepping into whatever tonight would become, and found silk the color of blood. Deep red, nearly crimson, cut to skim her body like a second skin before flowing into a dramatic train. There was a note tucked inside, Francesco's handwriting sharp and precise. "Wear nothing underneath. F." Aurora's hands shook as she lifted the dress from its tissue paper nest. This was real. Tonight was real. And there would be no pretending afterward that she was just Francesco Vitelli's consultant, just another professional relationship in a city full of them. She showered, dried her hair until it fell in dark waves past her shoulders, applied makeup with hands that wouldn't quite steady. The dress slid over her skin like water, fitting perfectly because, of course, Francesco had known her measurements, had probably known them for months, filing away that detail the same way he'd memorized her coffee order and the way she bit her lip when she was thinking. By the time Luca buzzed from downstairs at 7:30, Aurora barely recognized herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked dangerous, claimed, like she belonged to Francesco Vitelli's world instead of just visiting it. The drive to Francesco's building took 15 minutes. Aurora spent all of them trying to control her breathing, trying to prepare herself for what came next. But nothing could have prepared her for the sight of Francesco waiting in his penthouse, wearing a tuxedo that had definitely been custom-made, and looking at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "Aurora," he breathed, crossing to her in 3 strides. His hand settled on her hips, and she felt the heat of his palms through the thin silk. "You're going to kill me in this dress." That was the plan. His laugh was low, rough. "Turn around." She did slowly, feeling his gaze track every inch of exposed skin. When she faced him again, his jaw was tight, and his eyes had gone almost black. "You followed my instructions," he said quietly. "Was there any doubt?" "There's always doubt, Kara, but not tonight." His hand slid up her spine, fingers tracing the bare expanse of her back. "Tonight, you're mine, completely, and everyone is going to know it." Aurora should have felt objectified, should have pushed back against the possessive certainty in his voice, but all she felt was wanted, claimed, safe in a way that had nothing to do with physical protection and everything to do with the way Francesco looked at her like she was precious. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but let's go anyway." The gala was being held at the Sinclair Hotel, old money and older architecture, the kind of place that hosted charity events and political fundraisers, and probably more than a few illegal deals in its private rooms. Francesco's hand stayed on Aurora's lower back as they entered, guiding her through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man who owned every space he walked into. Eyes turned immediately. Aurora felt the weight of attention like a physical thing, saw the calculations happening behind polite smiles and champagne glasses. These people knew Francesco, knew his reputation, and now they were trying to figure out who she was and what she meant to him. Francesco made sure they didn't have to guess long. "Aurora Romano," he said, introducing her to a silver-haired man who radiated power and old money. "My partner. Aurora, this is Senator Whitmore. Partner. Not consultant, not colleague. Partner." The senator's handshake was firm, his smile practiced. "A pleasure, Miss Romano. I wasn't aware Francesco was seeing anyone." "It's a recent development," Aurora said, keeping her voice steady despite the way her heart was hammering. "Recent, but serious, I hope." The senator's eyes flicked between them, assessing. "Francesco doesn't bring just anyone to these events." "No," Francesco agreed, his hand tightening possessively on Aurora's waist. "I don't." They moved through this crowd like that, Francesco introducing her as his partner, his hand never leaving her body. His attention focused on her even when he was talking business with men whose names Aurora recognized from financial news. She smiled, made polite conversation, and tried not to think about the fact that half these people probably knew exactly what Francesco did beyond his legitimate business ventures. An hour in, Aurora excused herself to the restroom. She needed 5 minutes alone, 5 minutes to process the overwhelming reality of being Francesco Vitelli's public girlfriend at an event where power and danger mixed as freely as the champagne. The bathroom was blessedly empty. Aurora locked herself in a stall, pressing her palms against the cool marble walls and focusing on breathing. In, out, in, out. She could do this. She was doing this. And when she walked back out there, she'd smile and play her part. And the bathroom door opened. Heels clicked on marble. Multiple sets. "Did you see her dress?" A woman's voice, dripping with cattiness. "Francesco's new toy is certainly making a statement." Aurora froze, hand on the stall door. "Toy is right," another voice responded. "I give it 2 months before he gets bored and moves on. He always does." "Remember that actress? What was her name? Valentina something. He paraded her around for 6 weeks and then she disappeared completely. I heard she tried to go to the press about him. About his business. Stupid girl. What happened to her? No one knows. But she's not in the city anymore, and Francesco made sure everyone understood that talking about his private affairs was inadvisable. Aurora's blood went cold. Her hand was shaking on the stall door, her mind racing through implications. Francesco had warned her his world was dangerous, but he'd never mentioned previous girlfriends, never mentioned what happened to women who got too close and then tried to leave. "Well, this one looks smarter," the first woman said. "Did you see the way she barely spoke unless spoken to? She knows her place." "For now. But they all think they're special at first. They all think Francesco Vitelli is going to change for them. And then they learn what everyone here already knows. Men like him don't change. They just get better at hiding what they really are." The voices faded as the women left. Aurora stood in the stall, her reflection fractured in the metal door, and felt the first tendrils of real fear wrap around her heart. She should ask Francesco about Valentina, should demand to know what had happened to the other women he'd dated. But part of her didn't want to know. Didn't want confirmation that the man she was falling for might be more dangerous than she'd let herself believe. Aurora smoothed down her dress, checked her makeup, and walked back into the ballroom with a smile that felt like it might shatter at any moment. Francesco was waiting near the bar, talking to a man Aurora didn't recognize. When he saw her, his expression softened immediately. "There you are," he said, pulling her against his side. "I was beginning to think you'd climbed out a window." "Tempting," Aurora admitted, trying to keep her voice light. Francesco's eyes sharpened. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just needed a minute." "Aurora." "Francesco." The man he'd been talking to interrupted, extending a hand toward Aurora. "You didn't introduce me to your beautiful companion." There was something wrong about this man. Aurora felt it immediately, a crawling sensation at the base of her spine. The same instinct that had kept her safe in bad neighborhoods and worse business deals. He was tall, well-dressed, handsome in a cold sort of way. But his smile didn't reach his eyes, and when he took her hand, his grip was just a fraction too tight. "Marco Castellano," he said. "A pleasure to finally meet the woman who's captured Francesco's attention so completely." Aurora's heart stopped. This was Castellano, the man whose employee had targeted her, the man Francesco thought might retaliate for Paolo's death, and he was standing here, touching her hand, smiling like they were old friends. "Mr. Castellano," Aurora managed, pulling her hand back as subtly as possible. Francesco's arm went iron hard around her waist. "Marco, I didn't realize you'd be attending tonight. I wouldn't miss it. The Whitmore Foundation does such important work." Castellano's gaze stayed on Aurora, assessing and cold. "I was sorry to hear about Paolo Moretti. Such a tragedy. I understand he'd been seeing Ms. Romano before his untimely death." The implication hung in the air like poison. Aurora felt Francesco's entire body go rigid beside her. "Paolo's death was unfortunate," Francesco said, his voice carefully neutral. "But I fail to see what it has to do with Aurora." "Oh, nothing, I'm sure. Just offering my condolences. It must be difficult losing someone you were close to so suddenly." Aurora's throat was tight. "I wasn't close to him." "No?" Castellano's smile sharpened. "Strange. He spoke of you quite fondly, said you had a brilliant mind, very observant, the kind of woman who notices things others might miss. It wasn't a compliment, it was a threat, thinly veiled and deliberately provocative." Castellano was letting them know he knew about Aurora's connection to Paolo, was letting them know he was watching, calculating. "If you'll excuse us," Francesco said, his hand already guiding Aurora away, "we have other people to speak with." "Of course. Enjoy your evening, Miss Romano. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other." Francesco practically dragged Aurora to a quiet corner of the ballroom, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscle jumping. "That was a mistake," he said quietly. "I should have known he'd be here. Should have prepared you." "Prepared me for what? For him to basically accuse me of being involved in Paolo's death? He's fishing, trying to get a reaction. Well, he got one." Aurora's hands were shaking again. "Francesco, what if he thinks I had something to do with it? What if he won't touch you. I won't let him. You can't control everything. Watch me." Francesco pulled out his phone, typed something quickly, and less than a minute later, 3 men in dark suits appeared at their sides. Aurora recognized one of them, Luca, Francesco's driver. The other 2 were strangers, but they had the same watchful, dangerous quality. "Stay with her," Francesco ordered. "Don't let her out of your sight. I need to have a conversation with Castellano that doesn't involve her present." "Francesco, wait. But he was already walking away, cutting through the crowd with single-minded focus. Aurora watched him approach Castellano, saw them move together toward one of the private rooms off the main ballroom, and felt her stomach drop. "Ms. Romano," Luca said quietly, "perhaps you'd be more comfortable sitting down." "I'm fine." "You're shaking." She was. Aurora wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly freezing in the red dress that had seemed like armor an hour ago. "What's going to happen?" "Mr. Vitelli will handle it." "That's not an answer." Luca's expression didn't change. "It's the only answer I have." 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Aurora made small talk with people whose names she immediately forgot, drank champagne she couldn't taste, and tried not to watch the door Francesco had disappeared through. The two guards stayed close, not obviously hovering, but never more than a few feet away. Protection or imprisonment, Aurora wasn't sure which. When Francesco finally returned, his face was carefully blank, but Aurora could see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth. "We're leaving," he said. "What happened?" "Not here, in the car." The ride back to Francesco's penthouse was silent. Aurora sat as far from him as the back seat allowed, her mind spinning through possibilities, each worse than the last. When they finally reached his building, she followed him into the elevator without speaking, watched the numbers climb, and tried to prepare herself for whatever truth was about to be revealed. Inside his apartment, Francesco poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and drained half the glass in one swallow. "Castellano knows I had Paolo's resignation forced," he said finally. "He knows I threatened him, and he's decided that makes me responsible for his death." "But you didn't kill him." "No, but in Castellano's world, the distinction doesn't matter. Paolo was his employee, his asset, and I made him vulnerable by removing him from his protection, which means I'm accountable." Aurora sank onto Francesco's couch, her legs suddenly unreliable. "What does that mean?" "It means Castellano wants restitution. He wants me to admit responsibility and pay compensation." "How much?" $5 million and a favor to be named later. The number was staggering, but it was the second part that made Aurora's blood run cold. "What kind of favor?" "Whatever kind he decides he needs. Could be information, could be access. Could be asking me to look the other way when he does something I'd normally interfere with." Francesco finished his scotch and poured another. "It's a blank check, and if I refuse, he'll consider it a declaration of war." "So you pay him?" "It's not that simple." "Why not?" "Because if I pay him, every other person I've ever had a conflict with will see it as weakness. They'll see that targeting someone I care about is an effective way to leverage me, and you'll have a target on your back for the rest of your life." Aurora stood, anger finally burning through the fear. "So what? This is my fault? I'm the liability." "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant." She paced to the window, staring out at the city lights without seeing them. "Maybe those women in the bathroom were right. Maybe I should have stayed in my lane, kept this professional, not gotten involved with a man whose world is so complicated that dating him puts a price on my head." "What women?" Aurora told him about the bathroom conversation, about Valentina, about the implications that Francesco had made previous girlfriends disappear when they became inconvenient. By the time she finished, Francesco's face had gone completely blank. "You think I had something to do with Valentina leaving the city," he said. Not a question. "I don't know what to think anymore." "Aurora." "Just tell me the truth, Francesco. What happened to her?" "She tried to sell a story about me to a tabloid, about my business, my associates, details of conversations she'd overheard at events like tonight. I found out before the story ran, bought the publication, and killed the piece. Then I gave her 2 choices: sign an NDA and accept a settlement that would keep her comfortable for life, or refuse and deal with the legal consequences of violating multiple confidentiality agreements she'd already signed. And she chose the money. She chose survival, which was smart, because if she'd gone public, it wouldn't have been me she needed to worry about. It would have been all the people she named in her story who don't solve their problems with lawyers and settlements." Aurora wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that explanation and move past it. But the fear from earlier was still there, coiled tight in her chest. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" she asked quietly. Francesco flinched like she'd hit him. "Because I promised you no more secrets. Because I told you I wouldn't lie to you. And because if I was going to make you disappear, Aurora, I'd have done it the moment you became a complication instead of bringing you to a gala and introducing you as my partner. The logic was sound. But logic and trust weren't the same thing, and Aurora was rapidly discovering how much of their relationship was built on her choosing to believe Francesco when he said he'd protect her. I need to go home, she said. Aurora, please, I just need some space to think. Francesco's jaw worked. Fine. Luca will drive you. I can take a cab. The hell you can. You have 3 guards now, Kara. Get used to it. Aurora wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the controlling edge in his voice, but she was too tired, too overwhelmed, too uncertain about everything she thought she knew. The ride home was silent. Luca walked her to her apartment door, checked the interior before letting her enter, and stationed himself in the hallway outside. Aurora locked the door, kicked off her heels, and sank onto her couch, still wearing the red dress Francesco had chosen. Her phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. How'd the gala go? Aurora stared at the question, trying to figure out how to answer. How did she explain that she'd just stepped fully into Francesco Vitelli's world only to discover it was more dangerous and more complicated than she'd imagined? How did she explain that she was falling for a man who might be exactly what he claimed or might be something much worse? She typed back, It went. Talk tomorrow? Marcus's response came immediately. My office. 9 a.m. And you're buying coffee. Aurora set down the phone and closed her eyes. Tomorrow she'd deal with Marcus's questions and her own doubts and the growing certainty that she'd made a terrible mistake. But tonight she just needed to breathe. She must have fallen asleep on the couch because the next thing Aurora knew, her phone was ringing. She fumbled for it, disoriented and still half asleep, and saw Francesco's name on the screen. Hello? Her voice was rough with sleep. Aurora. Francesco sounded wrong, strained. I need you to listen very carefully. Do not leave your apartment. Do not open the door for anyone except Luca, and call me the moment anything feels wrong. Aurora sat up, suddenly wide awake. What's happening? Castellano just sent me a message. He's decided 5 million isn't enough compensation. He wants something else. What? You. The word hit like a physical blow. What do you mean, me? He wants you to come work for him, consulting, like you do for me. He claims it's about balancing the scales. I took his employee, so he gets access to mine. But we both know it's about leverage. If you're working for him, he can extract information about my business, about my associates, about everything you've learned over the past 6 months. I would never... I know that. He knows that. Which is why he's not actually expecting you to agree. He's expecting me to refuse, which gives him justification for whatever he's planning next. Aurora's apartment suddenly felt too small, too exposed. What do we do? You stay exactly where you are. I'm sending additional security, and I'm going to make Castellano understand that you are completely off limits. How? However I have to. The line went dead. Aurora sat in the darkness of her apartment, still wearing the red dress, and felt the walls closing in. This was what Francesco had warned her about. This was the danger he'd tried to protect her from. And she'd walked into it anyway because she'd been too attracted, too curious, too certain she could handle whatever his world threw at her. An hour passed, then 2. Aurora changed out of the dress finally, pulled on sweats and an old t-shirt, made coffee she didn't drink. Her phone stayed silent. Luca stayed outside her door, and somewhere in the city, Francesco was doing whatever it took to keep Castellano from turning her into a pawn in their game. Dawn was breaking when her phone finally rang again. Not Francesco this time. An unknown number. Aurora almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Ms. Romano? Castellano's voice smooth and cold. I hope I didn't wake you. How did you get this number? I make it my business to have access to things I need. Speaking of which, I wanted to discuss my offer directly, without Francesco's interference. I'm not interested. You haven't heard the full proposal. I don't need to. I'm not working for you. Even if it means protecting the people you care about? Castellano's voice sharpened. Your business partner, Marcus Chen. Your elderly mother in Portland. Your college roommate who just had a baby. They're all quite vulnerable, Ms. Romano. It would be unfortunate if something happened to them because you refused a simple consulting contract." Aurora's hand tightened on the phone, rage burning through the fear. "You're threatening my family. I'm explaining your options. Work for me for 6 months, provide the same quality consulting you provide Francesco, and everyone you care about stays safe. Refuse, and I can't guarantee their protection from the various dangers that exist in this city. Francesco will never let you get away with this." Francesco is currently very busy dealing with some unexpected complications at his Rotterdam operation. A shipment that's gone missing, contracts that are suddenly in question. He'll be occupied for quite some time, which gives you space to make your own decision without his influence. Aurora's mind was racing. Rotterdam, the deal she'd worked on, the projection she'd refined. If that fell apart, it would cost Francesco millions, maybe more. And Castellano had just admitted he was behind it. "You're trying to destroy him," she said quietly. "I'm trying to teach him a lesson. There are rules in our world, Ms. Romano, lines that don't get crossed. Francesco crossed one when he interfered with Paolo, and now he's learning that actions have consequences. And I'm the consequence. You're leverage. But you could be so much more. Come work for me, Aurora. Show Francesco what it feels like to lose something valuable. And I promise you, everyone you care about will be perfectly safe." Aurora wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Castellano exactly where he could shove his offer. But the threat to her mother, to Marcus, to people who had nothing to do with Francesco's world, that was real. And if Castellano was willing to sabotage the Rotterdam deal, he was willing to hurt innocent people to make his point. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have 24 hours. After that, I start making phone calls. And you won't like who I call or what I ask them to do." The line went dead. Aurora sat frozen on her couch, the phone still pressed to her ear, and felt her world fracture completely. Because Castellano was right about one thing, she had options. She could refuse and trust that Francesco would protect everyone she loved. She could agree and try to feed Castellano useless information while keeping Francesco's secrets safe. Or she could run, get on a plane like Francesco had suggested days ago, and let everyone else deal with the fallout. None of them were good options. All of them ended with someone getting hurt. Aurora was still sitting there, paralyzed by impossible choices, when her apartment door burst open. She screamed, reaching for her phone to call for help, but Luca was already there, his face grim. "We need to go," he said. "Now." "What's happening?" "Castellano's men are in the building. Mr. Vitelli sent me to extract you." Aurora grabbed her purse, didn't bother with shoes, and followed Luca into the hallway. They took the stairs, 13 floors at a run that left Aurora's lungs burning, and burst into the parking garage to find a car waiting. Not Francesco's usual sedan. Something faster, lower, built for speed instead of comfort. Luca shoved her into the passenger seat and peeled out before she'd even closed the door. "Where's Francesco?" Aurora demanded. "Dealing with the Rotterdam situation. He sent me to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "From being taken. Castellano didn't just threaten your family, Ms. Romano. He put out word that he wants you acquired. And there are enough people who owe him favors that someone was going to try." Aurora's hands were shaking. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere they can't find you. Mr. Vitelli's instructions were clear. Get you out of the city. Keep you hidden until he resolves this." "I can't just run." "You don't have a choice." But Aurora did have a choice. She'd always had a choice. And as Luca drove through the pre-dawn streets, heading for whatever safe house Francesco had arranged, Aurora made her decision. "Stop the car," she said. "Miss Romano, stop the car, Luca. Now." He pulled over, expression wary. "What are you doing?" "Something Francesco is going to hate, but it's the only way to end this without people getting hurt." Aurora pulled out her phone and dialed the number Castellano had called from. It rang twice before he answered. "Miss Romano, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." "I'll do it," Aurora said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I'll work for you, 6 months, but you leave my family alone. You leave Marcus alone. And you back off the Rotterdam deal." Castellano laughed, a cold, satisfied sound. "I'm afraid Rotterdam is already too far gone. But the rest, yes, you have my word. Report to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock sharp. And Ms. Romano, Don't tell Francesco about our arrangement. It'll be much more interesting if he finds out on his own. Aurora ended the call and looked at Luca. His expression was horrified. You can't do this, he said. Mr. Vitelli will understand that I'm protecting people I love, the same way he's been trying to protect me. Aurora's hands had stopped shaking. Her voice was clear. Take me back to my apartment, and don't tell Francesco where I am until morning. Give me time to figure out how to explain this to him. He'll never forgive me. Probably not, but he'll forgive me. Eventually. Luca drove her back in silence. Aurora walked into her apartment, locked the door, and sank onto her couch as the sun rose over a city that had just become infinitely more dangerous. In 24 hours, she'd step into Castellano's office and become exactly what Francesco had been trying to prevent, a weapon aimed directly at his heart. And there was absolutely no way this ended without someone getting destroyed. Aurora didn't sleep. She sat on her couch watching the sun climb over the city, her phone dark and silent on the coffee table, and tried to prepare herself for what came next. At 8:30, she showered and dressed in the most severe outfit she owned: black pants, white blouse, hair pulled back so tight it made her scalp ache. War paint for a battle she had no idea how to fight. Luca was still outside her door when she emerged at 8:45. His face was haggard, like he'd spent the entire night debating whether to follow her orders or call Francesco anyway. Ms. Romano, don't, Aurora said quietly. Whatever you're about to say, just don't. This is my choice, my decision, and I need you to respect that. He's going to destroy me when he finds out. Probably, but you were following my direct request. He'll understand that, eventually. Luca looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he just pulled out his keys. I'm driving you. That's not necessary. It absolutely is. If you're walking into Castellano's office, you're doing it with protection. Mr. Vitelli would expect that much, at least. Aurora didn't have the energy to fight him. She followed Luca to the car and let him navigate through morning traffic to the building that housed Castellano Investment Group. It was in the financial district, all glass and steel and respectable veneer over whatever darkness operated beneath. They pulled up at 8:58. Aurora took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. You can still change your mind, Luca said. No, I really can't. She walked into the building alone. The lobby was marble and money, security guards who looked more like soldiers, receptionists who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. Aurora gave her name and was immediately escorted to the elevator by a woman in a crisp suit who didn't speak or make eye contact. The ride to the top floor felt like ascending to an execution. Castellano's office was twice the size of Francesco's and half as warm. Everything was chrome and glass and sharp edges. The man himself stood at the window, looking out over the city like he owned it. Maybe he did. Maybe men like him and Francesco had carved the whole place into territories Aurora was only just beginning to see. Ms. Romano. Castellano turned and his smile was all teeth. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. Let's skip the pleasantries. You wanted me here. I'm here. What exactly do you expect me to do? Direct. I like that. Castellano gestured to a chair. Aurora remained standing. Very well. Your role is simple. You'll consult for my company the same way you consulted for Francesco. You'll analyze deals, review contracts, provide strategic advice. The only difference is that every piece of information you learn about my operations, you'll also share insights about Francesco's. I won't betray his confidences. You will. Or your mother receives a visit from some very unpleasant people who will make her last years considerably more difficult than they need to be. Aurora's hands clenched into fists. You're a monster. I'm a businessman, and business requires leverage. Castellano moved closer, invading her space deliberately. Here's what's going to happen, Aurora. You're going to spend the next 6 months learning everything you can about my organization. You're going to smile and nod and do excellent work. And every week you're going to have dinner with Francesco, because he won't be able to stay away from you. And you're going to carefully, subtly, extract information that I can use. And if I refuse, then people start dying. Not you. That would be too obvious. But the people you care about will experience unfortunate accidents. Your mother's car will malfunction. Marcus will get mugged in the wrong neighborhood. Your college friend's house will catch fire while her baby is sleeping. Are you starting to understand? Aurora understood perfectly. This was what Francesco had tried to protect her from. This was the reality of his world, a place where human lives were chess pieces and morality was negotiable. I understand, she said quietly. When do I start? Right now. I have a contract that needs review. Show me what makes you valuable enough to fight over. The next 3 hours were surreal. Aurora sat at a conference table reviewing merger documents while Castellano and his associates discussed logistics that skirted the edge of legality. She made notes, asked questions, provided analysis that was technically sound and morally hollow, and the entire time she was thinking about Francesco, about how he was going to react when he found out, about whether he'd understand why she'd made this choice or if he'd see it as the ultimate betrayal. At noon, Castellano dismissed his team and turned to Aurora. Excellent work. You're everything Francesco claimed, which makes this next part particularly satisfying. What next part? Castellano pulled out his phone and made a call. Send him up. Aurora's stomach dropped. What did you do? I invited Francesco to lunch. I thought he should see his asset settling into her new role. The elevator dinged. Aurora spun toward the sound, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. And then Francesco stepped into Castellano's office, and the expression on his face made Aurora's blood freeze. He looked at her like she was a stranger, like she was the enemy. Francesco, she started. Don't. His voice was arctic. Don't say a fucking word. Castellano's laugh was delighted. Francesco, please. There's no need for hostility. Aurora and I have been having a very productive morning, haven't we, Aurora? Francesco's gaze never left her face. Is that true? You came here voluntarily? Aurora opened her mouth, but the words stuck. Because how did she explain? How did she make him understand that she'd traded herself to protect people he'd never met, people who weren't part of his world, but were everything to hers? Answer me, Francesco said, and there was something broken underneath the ice in his voice. Did you choose this? Yes. The word fell like a bomb. Francesco actually recoiled, like she'd struck him. Why? He asked quietly. Because he threatened my mother, my friends, Marcus, everyone I care about who isn't protected by armed guards and bulletproof cars. Aurora took a step toward him, and Francesco took a step back. I did this to keep them safe. By betraying me. By protecting them. It's the same thing, Aurora. Don't you see that? The moment you walked into this office, the moment you agreed to work for Castellano, you chose them over me. That's not fair. Fair. Francesco's laugh was harsh. You want to talk about fair? I told you I would protect you. I told you I would handle Castellano. I told you to trust me. And instead you made a deal with the man trying to destroy me. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that when things got difficult, when the stakes got real, you decided I wasn't worth the risk. Francesco's hands were shaking. Aurora had never seen him shake before. I understand that you looked at my world and decided you wanted out badly enough to sell me out. That's not true. Then what is true, Aurora? Because from where I'm standing, you made a choice, and it wasn't me. Castellano was watching them with undisguised glee, clearly enjoying every second of their confrontation. Aurora wanted to scream at him, wanted to throw something, wanted to make him understand that he'd engineered this specifically to hurt Francesco as much as possible, but Francesco was already turning away. Wait, Aurora said desperately. Please, just let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You made your decision. Now live with it. Francesco walked to the elevator, his shoulders rigid. One piece of advice, though, Cara. Be very careful what information you share with Castellano, because the moment he's done with you, the moment you're no longer useful, all those people you're trying to protect, they stop being leverage, they become witnesses, and Castellano doesn't leave witnesses. The elevator doors closed. Aurora stood frozen in the middle of Castellano's office, feeling like she'd just watched something irreplaceable shatter. Her chest was tight, her vision blurring, and she couldn't seem to get enough air. That went well, Castellano said cheerfully. Now, shall we discuss your first real assignment? Aurora turned to face him, and something must have shown in her expression because his smile faltered slightly. You destroyed that on purpose, she said quietly. You could have told him I was working for you a dozen different ways. But you waited. You made sure he'd walk in and see me here, in your office, looking like I belonged to you instead of him. Jealousy is such a powerful motivator. And Francesco Vitelli jealous is Francesco Vitelli making mistakes. You're using me to break him. I'm using you to teach him a lesson. There's a difference. Castellano moved to his desk, shuffling papers like they'd just had a pleasant business meeting instead of orchestrating emotional devastation. Your assignment is simple. Francesco has been trying to acquire a property in the Harbor District. Commercial real estate, very valuable, very strategic. I want you to find out his ceiling price, what he's actually willing to pay versus what he's telling the sellers. And how am I supposed to get that information if he won't speak to me? That's your problem to solve. You're a consultant, Aurora. Figure it out. Aurora left Castellano's office feeling hollowed out. Luca was waiting in the lobby, his expression grim. He knows, Luca said as soon as she was in the car. I'm aware. He called me. I've never heard him that angry. Not even when Luca cut himself off. Not even when what? Not even when his father died. Mr. Vitelli doesn't lose control, Ms. Romano. But he did today. Because of you. The guilt was suffocating. Aurora pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to hold back tears that wouldn't help anything. Take me home. He said I'm not to leave you alone. Security detail until further notice. I don't need... With respect, Ms. Romano, what you need and what Mr. Vitelli has ordered are two different things. And right now, I'm following his orders. So Aurora went home to an apartment that felt like a cage, with Luca stationed outside and her phone full of missed calls from Marcus demanding to know what the hell was happening. She ignored them all. Sat on her couch in the same spot she'd occupied last night and tried to figure out how everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. Her phone buzzed. Not Marcus this time. A text from an unknown number. You made the right choice. Francesco will calm down eventually. In the meantime, I need that Harbor District information by Friday. MC. Aurora threw the phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, screen cracking. She didn't care. Didn't care about anything except the look on Francesco's face when she'd confirmed she'd chosen this. Like she'd reached into his chest and torn something vital out. Hours passed. The sun set. Aurora didn't move, didn't eat, didn't do anything except replay the conversation over and over, looking for the moment she could have said something different, something that would have made Francesco understand. At midnight, someone knocked on her door. Aurora's heart leapt. Maybe Francesco had come back, maybe he was ready to listen. But when she opened it, Marcus was standing there looking furious. You want to tell me why I just got a very interesting phone call from Francesco Vitelli's lawyer? Marcus pushed past her into the apartment. Something about terminating our consulting contract effective immediately and demanding a full audit of every piece of work you've done for him in the past 6 months? Aurora closed the door. It's complicated. It's insane is what it is. That contract is 30% of our revenue, Aurora. We can't lose it. And we definitely can't afford an audit that's clearly designed to find something wrong so he can sue us into oblivion. He won't find anything wrong. I didn't do anything wrong. Then why is he doing this? Aurora sank onto her couch. Because I hurt him, and he's hurting me back the only way he knows how. You hurt him. You hurt Francesco Vitelli. Marcus stared at her. Aurora, what the hell did you do? So Aurora told him. Everything. The threats to her family, Castellano's offer, the choice she'd made to protect people Francesco didn't even know existed. And Marcus listened with an expression that grew progressively more horrified. You're working for Castellano, he said when she finished. You're actively working for the man trying to destroy our biggest client. Former client. That's not funny. I'm not joking. Francesco made it very clear today that we're done. All of us. Me, you, Chen Romano Consulting. He's cutting ties completely. Marcus paced across her apartment, hands in his hair. Okay. We can fix this. We'll terminate your contract with Castellano. You'll apologize to Francesco. I can't terminate the contract. Castellano will hurt my mother if I do. Then we go to the police. And tell them what? That a legitimate businessman made vague threats? They can't help Marcus. This is Francesco's world. And in his world, there are no authorities you can call. There's just power and leverage, and people willing to do terrible things to get what they want. So what? You're just going to work for Castellano for 6 months and hope Francesco eventually forgives you? Aurora laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Francesco is never going to forgive me. You should have seen his face, Marcus. I destroyed something in him today. Something I don't think can be fixed. You're in love with him. It wasn't a question. Aurora looked up at her business partner, at the man who'd known her for 8 years and couldn't find the energy to deny it. Yeah, she whispered. I am. Then fight for him. How? He won't talk to me. Won't answer my calls. And even if he did, what am I supposed to say? Sorry I betrayed you, but it was for a good reason. You didn't betray him. You made an impossible choice in an impossible situation. He doesn't see it that way. Marcus sat down beside her. Then make him see it that way. Find a way to get the information Castellano wants without actually giving him anything he can use against Francesco. Play both sides. And when this is over, when your mother is safe and Castellano has no more leverage, you tell Francesco everything and pray he understands. That's a terrible plan. You have a better one? Aurora didn't. So over the next 3 days, she executed Marcus's terrible plan. She showed up at Castellano's office every morning, reviewed contracts and analyzed deals, and looked for any scrap of information about the Harbor District property that wouldn't actually hurt Francesco if Castellano got it. She called the listing agent, pretending to be a potential buyer, researched comparable sales, built a valuation model based on public records, and she came up with the number, $15 million, that was close enough to the truth to satisfy Castellano, but far enough off to protect Francesco's actual strategy. Friday morning, she delivered her analysis. Castellano reviewed it with the same cold smile he seemed to wear permanently. Excellent work. Francesco's ceiling is $15 million, you say? Based on comparable sales and his typical investment criteria, yes. Interesting, because I happen to know his actual ceiling is $12 million, which means you just tried to lie to me, Aurora. Aurora's blood went cold. I didn't lie. I gave you my professional analysis based on information designed to mislead me. Castellano stood, moving around his desk with predatory grace. Did you really think I wouldn't verify your work? That I wouldn't have my own sources inside Francesco's organization? If you already knew the number, why ask me for it? To see if you'd tell the truth. To see if your loyalty to Francesco was stronger than your fear for your family. Castellano's hand shot out, gripping Aurora's jaw hard enough to hurt. Clearly, it is, which means we need to recalibrate your motivations. He released her and pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke in rapid Italian, then hung up and smiled at Aurora's white face. That was my associate in Portland. He's currently parked outside your mother's nursing home. One phone call from me, and he walks inside. Are we clear? Aurora couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Her mother was in that nursing home because of early onset dementia. She couldn't protect herself, couldn't even understand what was happening most days. And Castellano was threatening to... Crystal clear, Aurora managed. Good. Now, here's what's going to happen. You're going to call Francesco. You're going to apologize, grovel, do whatever it takes to get him to talk to you again. And when you do, you're going to extract the real information I need. Not public records bullshit. Real strategy. Real numbers. Or your mother has an unfortunate accident that her failing mind can't protect her from. Aurora's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her phone. But she pulled up Francesco's number. He'd blocked her from calling directly, but she still had his office line, and dialed. Carlotta answered. Vitelli Enterprises. It's Aurora Romano. I need to speak with Francesco. Mr. Vitelli is not taking calls from you, Ms. Romano. I've been instructed to... Please, Aurora's voice cracked. Please just tell him I called. Tell him I need to see him. Tell him... She took a shaking breath. Tell him I'm sorry. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll pass along the message. The line went dead. Aurora looked at Castellano, whose expression was expectant. He won't see me, she said. Then make him. You have 24 hours. After that, I make another call to Portland. Aurora left Castellano's office and immediately called Luca. He answered on the first ring. I need to see Francesco, she said without preamble. Today. Now. I don't care if he doesn't want to see me. I need 5 minutes. Ms. Romano, Please, Luca, I know he's angry. I know he probably never wants to speak to me again, but I need to see him. It's literally life or death. Another pause. Then, he's at the Harbor District property, inspecting the site before final negotiations. Can you take me there? If I do this, I'm directly disobeying his orders. I know, and I'm sorry, but please. Luca sighed. Get in the car. The property was on the waterfront, old warehouses being converted to mixed-use development, millions of dollars in potential revenue. Francesco's car was parked outside the main building, and Aurora's heart started hammering the moment she saw it. Stay here, Luca said, but Aurora was already out of the car. She found Francesco on the third floor, standing in what would eventually be luxury condos, but was currently just exposed brick and construction debris. He didn't turn when she entered, but his shoulders went rigid. You have approximately 30 seconds before I have security remove you, he said quietly. I know you don't want to see me. I know you think I betrayed you, and I know nothing I say right now is going to fix what I broke. Aurora moved closer, her footsteps echoing on concrete. But I need you to listen, just for a minute. I don't owe you anything. No, you don't, but I'm asking anyway, because Castellano is threatening my mother, right now. He has someone parked outside her nursing home, and if I don't give him the information he wants about this property, he's going to hurt her. Francesco finally turned to face her. His expression was carefully blank, but Aurora could see the war happening behind his eyes. So you came to extract information, he said. Exactly like Castellano planned. Yes, but I'm telling you that's why I'm here. I'm not hiding it. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm asking, begging for your help. You want me to give you information you can use to undermine my business. Information that will help Castellano acquire a property I've been negotiating for 6 months. And you think I should do this to save a woman I've never met. Put like that, it sounded insane. Aurora knew it sounded insane. I think you should do it because you told me you cared about me, she said quietly. And people we care about have families who matter to them, even if they don't matter to us. Francesco was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. You broke something, Aurora. Something I didn't realize I needed until you showed me it existed. And then you walked away from it. From me, the first time things got hard. I walked toward danger to protect people I love. That's not the same as walking away from you. It is from where I'm standing. Francesco moved to the window, looking out at the water. My ceiling is 12 million. The property is worth 11. I'll offer 10.5 and settle at 11.2 if I have to. Castellano will probably offer 13 to price me out. He'll overpay significantly and consider it worth the cost just to hurt me. Aurora's chest was tight. Why are you telling me this? Because your mother doesn't deserve to suffer because you got involved with me. Because I'm apparently not angry enough to let an innocent woman get hurt. And because... He stopped, jaw working. Because despite everything, despite the fact that you chose Castellano's leverage over my protection, I apparently can't stop caring about what happens to you. Francesco, don't. Don't make this into something it's not. I'm giving you information to save your mother, not to save us. There is no us anymore, Aurora. You made sure of that. The words cut deeper than any knife. Aurora felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Thank you. Get out. And don't come back. If I see you again, if you try to contact me again, I will make sure Castellano understands exactly how little you actually mean to me, which might be the only thing that keeps you safe from him long term. Aurora turned and walked away, each step feeling like she was leaving pieces of herself behind. She made it to the car before the tears started. Luca didn't say anything, just drove while Aurora cried silently in the passenger seat, mourning something that had barely begun before it was destroyed. She delivered the information to Castellano that afternoon. He verified it through his sources. Whatever spy he had in Francesco's organization confirmed the numbers, and smiled his shark smile. Excellent. See how easy this is when you cooperate? He made a call, spoke briefly in Italian, then hung up. My associate in Portland is standing down. Your mother is safe. For now. For now? For as long as you continue to be useful. Which brings me to your next assignment. Aurora's hands clenched. We had a deal. 6 months. Nothing more. The deal was 6 months of consulting work. Not 6 months, and then you're free. As long as I need information about Francesco's operations, you'll provide it. or we revisit the conversation about your mother's safety. You're changing the terms. I'm clarifying them. Don't worry, Aurora. If you're cooperative, this arrangement can continue indefinitely with no one getting hurt. All you have to do is keep Francesco close enough to extract what I need. Think you can manage that? Aurora thought about Francesco's face when he told her there was no us anymore. Thought about the careful way he'd given her information while simultaneously cutting her out of his life. Thought about spending the next however many months trying to manipulate a man who now saw her as the enemy. I don't have a choice, she said quietly. Now you're learning. Same time Monday. And Aurora, try not to look so miserable. It's unbecoming. Aurora went home. Marcus was waiting in her apartment. Apparently Luca had decided 2 guards were better than 1, and took one look at her face before pulling her into a hug. That bad? He asked. Worse. Castellano's changed the deal. It's not 6 months anymore. It's forever. Or until he decides I'm not useful anymore, which Aurora pulled back, wiping at her eyes. Which probably ends with me knowing too much to be allowed to walk away. Then we end this. Now. We go to Francesco, we tell him everything. I can't. He made it very clear today that he's done with me. And even if he wasn't, what am I supposed to say? Please protect my mother from the man I'm working for because I chose his leverage over your help? Aurora laughed bitterly. Francesco gave me information today to save my mother, but he did it while making absolutely sure I understood that it didn't mean he forgave me. Didn't mean there was any path back to what we had. So we find another way. There is no other way, Marcus. This is my life now. I work for Castellano until he decides I'm done, and I live with the fact that I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me to get here. But Marcus was shaking his head, pacing with the kind of manic energy that meant he was formulating a plan. No, absolutely not. I refuse to accept that. There has to be something we can do. Some way to Aurora's phone rang. Unknown number again. She answered, and Castellano's voice filled her ear. Change of plans. Francesco just made an unexpected move on the harbor property. He's offering 13.5. Well above his stated ceiling, which means he's willing to take a significant loss just to keep me from acquiring it. Castellano's voice was cold. Which means you gave me bad information. Which means we need to have another conversation about motivation. I gave you exactly what he told me. If he changed his strategy, then you didn't extract the real plan. You got what he wanted you to get, which makes you either incompetent or still loyal to him. A pause. I'm leaning toward the latter, which means your mother isn't sufficient leverage. So let's try something else. What do you want? Marcus Chen, your business partner. Tell me, Aurora, what do you think would happen to him if he had an unfortunate encounter in a dark parking garage? Aurora's blood froze. She looked at Marcus, who was watching her with growing alarm. Leave him out of this. Then prove your loyalty. I want Francesco's actual ceiling on the harbor property, his real numbers, not the ones he fed you to test whether you'd report back to me. You have 6 hours. After that, Marcus becomes a cautionary tale about the cost of protecting Francesco Vitelli. The line went dead. Aurora stared at her phone, feeling the walls close in. Because Castellano was right. Francesco had played her. Had given her information knowing she'd deliver it, knowing it would make Castellano overconfident. And now Castellano knew he'd been played, which meant the target had shifted from Aurora's mother to Marcus. What did he say? Marcus demanded. Aurora looked at her best friend, at the man who'd helped her build a business from nothing, who'd stood by her through every mistake and bad decision, and felt something inside her crack completely. He's going to kill you, she whispered. Unless I betray Francesco again. Really betray him this time. Not just relaying information he wanted shared, but actually breaking into his trust and stealing something real. Then we go to the police, right now. We tell them everything. They can't help. You know they can't help. Aurora was shaking. Castellano is too well connected, too careful. By the time the police could do anything, you'd already be dead. And my mother would be next. And Castellano would walk away clean because he always does. So what do we do? Aurora thought about Francesco's face when he told her to get out. Thought about the way he'd looked at her, like she was a stranger. Thought about the fact that he'd helped her today despite everything, which meant some part of him still cared, even if he'd never admit it. And she made her decision. We end this, Aurora said quietly. Tonight, we end Castellano before he can hurt anyone else. Aurora, that's insane. Probably. But I'm done playing by his rules. I'm done letting him threaten people I love. And I'm done losing pieces of myself to keep everyone else safe. Aurora grabbed her phone, pulling up a number she'd sworn she'd never use. I'm calling Francesco. I'm telling him everything, and I'm asking him to help me destroy Marco Castellano. He'll never agree. Not after what you did. Maybe not. But I have to try. Because the alternative is watching Castellano pick off everyone I care about one by one until I'm completely alone. And I'd rather die fighting than live like that. Aurora hit dial before she could change her mind. The phone rang once, twice. On the third ring, Francesco answered. I told you not to contact me again. Castellano is going to kill Marcus, Aurora said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. He's going to kill him because I couldn't get him real information about the harbor property. Because you played me and I fell for it, and now Castellano knows I'm either incompetent or still protecting you. Silence on the other end. I'm not asking you to forgive me, Aurora continued. I'm not asking you to take me back or trust me or any of the things I destroyed. I'm asking you to help me kill Marco Castellano before he kills everyone I've ever cared about. More silence. Then Francesco's voice, carefully controlled. What makes you think I'd help you? Because you're a better man than he is. Because you gave me information today to save my mother even though you hate me. And because somewhere under all that anger, you still care enough to not want to watch me lose everything. You're asking me to start a war. I'm asking you to end one. Castellano won't stop, Francesco. Not with me, not with you. He'll keep pushing until one of us breaks or dies, so let's break him first. The silence stretched so long Aurora thought Francesco had hung up. Then, my office. 1 hour. Come alone. The line went dead. Aurora looked at Marcus, who was staring at her like she'd lost her mind. You're really doing this, he said. I'm really doing this. This could get you killed. Staying with Castellano will definitely get me killed. At least this way, I'm fighting back. Marcus pulled her into a fierce hug. For the record, I think this is the worst idea you've ever had, but I also think it's the bravest. So whatever happens next, I'm proud of you. Aurora held on to him for a moment, memorizing the feeling of safety and friendship and support. Then she pulled back, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Marcus called. To make a deal with the devil I know, Aurora said, and pray he's angry enough at Castellano to help me destroy him. The drive to Francesco's office felt like driving toward her own execution. Luca tried to make conversation, but Aurora couldn't focus on anything except what she was about to do. She was walking into Francesco Vitelli's territory after betraying him, asking him to risk everything to save people he had no obligation to protect. It was insane. It was desperate. It was the only option she had left. The elevator ride to Francesco's penthouse office felt endless. When the doors finally opened, he was waiting. Not behind his desk this time, standing in the middle of the room, arms crossed, expression completely unreadable. Talk, he said. So Aurora talked. She told him everything. The threats to her mother, the changing terms of Castellano's deal, the way the leverage had shifted from her family to Marcus to anyone Francesco cared about. She told him about the harbor property information, about Castellano's reaction, about the 6 hours she had before Marcus became a target. Francesco listened without interrupting, his expression never changing. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You want me to help you kill Marco Castellano, he said finally. I want you to help me end this, however that needs to happen. Do you have any idea what you're asking? Castellano has been operating in this city for 20 years. He has connections, leverage, protection at every level. Taking him down doesn't happen quietly. It doesn't happen cleanly. And it definitely doesn't happen without significant risk to everyone involved. I know. Do you? Francesco moved closer, and Aurora forced herself to hold his gaze. Because the moment we move against him, the moment we declare this kind of war, there's no going back. People will get hurt. Some of them might be people you care about. And when it's over, if we even survive, you'll have blood on your hands that no amount of justification will wash clean. I'm already covered in blood, Francesco. Castellano made sure of that the moment he threatened my mother. At least this way, I'm fighting back instead of just bleeding out slowly. Something flickered in Francesco's expression. Respect maybe, or recognition of someone who'd finally understood the rules of his world. If we do this, he said quietly, we do it my way. Complete trust, complete honesty. No more secrets. No more choosing other people's safety over the plan. You're either all in or you walk away right now. I'm all in. Even if that means watching me do things that terrify you, even if it means becoming someone you don't recognize. Aurora thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, careful, controlled, safely removed from anything that might complicate her ordered life. That woman was gone, destroyed the moment she'd chosen to walk into Francesco Vitelli's world. I stopped being that person the day I met you, she said. So yes, even if it terrifies me, even if it changes me, I'm all in. Francesco studied her face like he was looking for cracks, for weakness, for any sign she'd break under pressure. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Gather the team, my office. 1 hour. He hung up and looked at Aurora. You have 6 hours before Castellano moves on Marcus. We have 1 hour to plan how we're going to end Marco Castellano's operation permanently. Think you can handle that? Aurora's heart was hammering, but her voice was steady. Yes. Good. Because once this starts, there's no stopping it. No changing your mind. No mercy for anyone who gets in the way. Francesco's hand came up, cupping her jaw the way he had a week ago when everything between them had still been possible. Last chance, Aurora. Walk away now, and I'll find another way to protect Marcus. But if you stay, if you see this through, you become part of my world for real. Not just visiting, not just playing at danger. You become one of us, and there's no coming back from that. Aurora leaned into his touch, feeling the warmth of his palm against her skin, and made her choice. I don't want to come back, she said quietly. I want to finish this. With you. Francesco's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and for just a moment, Aurora saw past the anger to the hurt underneath. To the man who'd cared about her enough to give her information even when he hated her, to the man who was about to risk everything because she'd asked. Okay then, he said, let's go to war. Francesco's team arrived in stages, 6 men and 1 woman, all carrying themselves with the kind of controlled violence that came from years of operating in shadows. Aurora recognized Luca. The others were strangers, but they looked at Francesco with the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought, only earned through blood and shared history. This is Aurora Romano, Francesco said without preamble. She's the reason we're here. Marco Castellano has been using her as leverage against me, threatening her family, extorting information, and as of 6 hours ago, he escalated to threatening her business partner's life. We're going to end him tonight. The woman, dark-haired, mid-30s with a scar along her jawline, studied Aurora with sharp eyes. She's the consultant, the one who went to work for Castellano. Yes. And we're supposed to trust her? You're supposed to trust me, Francesco said quietly. And I'm telling you, she's with us. The woman nodded slowly, but Aurora could feel the weight of suspicion in the room. These people had watched Francesco get hurt, had probably seen him barely holding himself together over the past week, and now he was asking them to risk everything for the woman who'd caused that damage. Castellano operates out of 3 primary locations, Francesco continued, pulling up a map on his office screen. His corporate headquarters downtown, his private residence in the hills, and a warehouse in the industrial district where he conducts his less legitimate business. We hit all 3 simultaneously, take his infrastructure apart piece by piece until he has nowhere left to hide. That's a lot of ground to cover, one of the men said. We'll need at least 20 people to do it right. We have them. I've been calling in favors for the past hour. By midnight, we'll have enough personnel to execute this properly. Francesco's gaze swept the room. But I need to be very clear about what we're doing here. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't about sending a message. This is about completely destroying Marco Castellano's operation, which means some of the things we do tonight will cross lines, legal lines, moral lines, and anyone who's not comfortable with that needs to leave now. No one moved. Good. Sophia, you take the warehouse with Team 1. Luca, the residence with Team 2. I'll handle headquarters personally. Francesco looked at Aurora. You're staying here. Like hell I am. Aurora, you said I was all in. You said complete trust, complete honesty. That means I don't sit on the sidelines while you risk your life because of decisions I made. Aurora crossed her arms, holding his gaze. I'm coming with you. The room went silent. Everyone was watching Francesco, waiting to see how he'd react to being challenged. Aurora held her breath, half expecting him to pull rank, to use that controlled authority he wielded so effectively. Instead, he studied her face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Fine, but you follow orders. No improvising, no heroics, and if I tell you to run, you run. Understood? Understood. Francesco turned back to his team. We move at midnight. That gives us 4 hours to prepare. Sophia, coordinate with the warehouse team. Luca, make sure the residence assault has proper exits mapped. Everyone else, weapons check and final briefing at 11:30. Go. The team dispersed, leaving Aurora alone with Francesco in his office. The silence between them was heavy with everything unsaid, apologies and accusations, and the complicated truth that they were about to go to war together despite the wreckage of what they'd once been. You don't have to do this, Francesco said quietly. I meant what I said. I can protect Marcus without you being involved in the actual operation. I know, but I need to be there. I need to see this through. Aurora moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in Francesco's eyes. And I need you to know that I'm sorry for all of it, for choosing Castellano's threats over your protection, for hurting you, for breaking something that mattered more than I realized until it was gone. Francesco's jaw tightened. This isn't the time. When is the time? After we destroy Castellano? After someone gets killed? After we both walk away from this and never speak again? Aurora's voice cracked. I know you don't forgive me. I know there's no going back to what we had. But I need you to understand why I made the choices I made. Not because it excuses anything, just because you deserve the truth. I already know the truth, Aurora. You were scared. You made a decision based on fear, and in doing so, you proved that when things get hard, you don't trust me to handle them. That's not fair. No? Then tell me what I should have done differently. Tell me how I could have convinced you to let me protect your mother instead of trading yourself to Castellano. Aurora wanted to argue, wanted to point out that Francesco's world was foreign to her, that she'd made the best choice she could with the information she had. But he was right. She hadn't trusted him, hadn't believed he could protect people he didn't know from a threat he'd warned her was coming. You're right, she said quietly. I should have trusted you, should have let you handle it your way instead of panicking and making a deal with someone I knew would destroy us both. Aurora took a shaking breath. But I can't undo it. All I can do is try to help fix it now. Francesco was silent for a long moment, and Aurora could see the war happening behind his carefully controlled expression. The part of him that wanted to stay angry battling with the part that still cared despite everything. After tonight, he said finally, after Castellano is dealt with, we're done. Professionally, personally. All of it. You walk away, I walk away, and we both pretend the past 6 months never happened. The words hit like physical blows, but Aurora forced herself to nod. Okay? I mean it, Aurora. No more texts, no more calls. No more showing up at my office asking for second chances. This ends tonight. I understand. Francesco turned away, his shoulders rigid. Get some rest. You're going to need it. Aurora left his office and found an empty conference room down the hall. She tried to sleep, tried to prepare herself mentally for whatever came next. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Francesco's face when he told her they were done. Saw the careful way he'd locked down his emotions, building walls she'd never be able to scale again. At 11:30, Francesco's team reassembled. Aurora had been given body armor, lightweight but effective, and a communication device that fit in her ear. She looked around at the faces of people preparing for violence, people who did this regularly enough to have systems and protocols, and felt completely out of her depth. Francesco appeared at her side, adjusting the straps on her vest with practiced efficiency. His hands were impersonal, professional, nothing like the way he'd touched her a week ago when everything had still been possible. Stay behind me at all times, he said quietly. Don't engage unless absolutely necessary. And if shooting starts, you get to cover and you stay there until I give the all clear. What if something happens to you? Then Luca will extract you. He has standing orders to get you out safely, no matter what. Aurora wanted to argue, wanted to say she wouldn't leave him behind, but Francesco was already moving away, addressing the full team with the kind of commanding presence that made grown men stand straighter. Final brief, he said. Teams 1 and 2 move on the warehouse and residence at exactly midnight. Team 3, my team, will be hitting headquarters 15 minutes later. The delay gives Castellano time to hear about the first 2 attacks, which means he'll either run or fortify. Either way, we'll know where he is. What about casualties? Someone asked. We're not here to kill people. We're here to dismantle an organization. That means destroying records, seizing assets, and making sure Castellano understands that his protection is gone. If his people want to fight, we defend ourselves. But this isn't a massacre, it's a demolition. Aurora felt a small measure of relief. She'd been terrified Francesco's plan involved actual murder, that she'd have to watch him become someone unrecognizable. But this was strategic destruction, still brutal, still dangerous, but not senseless violence. Questions? Francesco asked. No one spoke. Good. Sync watches. We move in 10. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. Aurora checked and rechecked her vest, her communication device, her understanding of the plan. Francesco moved through the team with quiet efficiency, making small adjustments, offering low words Aurora couldn't hear. And then it was time. The drive to Castellano's headquarters was silent. Aurora sat in the back of an armored SUV with Francesco and 3 others, watching the city pass by through tinted windows. At 11:58, Francesco's earpiece crackled. Team 1 in position. Team 2 in position. Francesco checked his watch. Execute. Even from across the city, Aurora could hear the distant sounds of chaos as teams 1 and 2 hit their targets simultaneously. Alarms, shouting, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. Francesco's expression never changed, but Aurora saw his hand tighten fractionally on his weapon. Warehouse secure, came Sophia's voice. Minimal resistance. We have the records. Residence clear, Luca reported. Castellano wasn't here. Repeat, primary target not at residence. Francesco smiled, cold and satisfied. Because he's exactly where we thought he'd be. Team 3, move in. The SUV pulled up to Castellano Investment Group's building. From the outside, it looked quiet, normal. But Aurora could see security scrambling inside, could see lights flickering on as Castellano's people realized they were under coordinated attack. Francesco's team moved like a machine. 2 men disabled the security system. Another 3 cleared the lobby with brutal efficiency. And then they were in the elevator, ascending to the top floor where Castellano's office waited. Aurora's heart was hammering so hard she could barely breathe. The elevator dinged, doors opened, and Francesco stepped out with his weapon raised. Aurora pressed close behind him. Castellano's office was empty, papers scattered everywhere like someone had left in a hurry. But the man himself was nowhere to be seen. He ran, one of Francesco's men said. Probably out the service exit. Francesco spoke into his communication device. All teams, Castellano is mobile. Lock down a 5-block radius. I want eyes on every exit. Got him, came Sophia's voice. Black sedan heading south on Merchant Street, 2 blocks from you. Francesco was already moving, pulling Aurora with him back to the elevator. They burst out of the building just in time to see Castellano's car screech around a corner. Francesco's driver had the SUV running, and they piled in, the vehicle lurching into motion before the doors were even fully closed. The chase was brief, violent. Castellano's driver tried to lose them in the maze of downtown streets, but Francesco's team had cut off every avenue of escape. Within minutes, they had the black sedan boxed in, nowhere left to run. Francesco stepped out of the SUV slowly, deliberately. Aurora followed, her pulse thundering in her ears. Castellano emerged from his car with his hands raised, his usual composure fractured by genuine fear. Francesco, he said, trying for his characteristic smile, this seems excessive. Surely we can discuss this like civilized people. You threatened Aurora's mother, Francesco said quietly, each word precise and cold. You threatened her business partner. You tried to use her as leverage against me, and you actually believed I'd let that stand. She came to me voluntarily because you gave her no choice, because you're a coward who hides behind threats to innocent people instead of fighting your own battles. Castellano's eyes flicked to Aurora. This is all for her? You're destroying everything we've built in this city, decades of carefully maintained balance, because of one woman? No, Francesco said. I'm destroying you because you forgot the rules. You forgot that some lines don't get crossed, and you convinced yourself that my patience was weakness." He raised his weapon, and Aurora's stomach clenched. "Any last words?" "Wait," Aurora said, stepping forward. "Don't." Francesco didn't lower his weapon. "Aurora, please, just listen." She looked at Castellano, at the man who'd terrorized her for weeks, who'd held her family hostage, who'd tried to destroy everything she cared about. "You're right that killing him would be excessive, but there are other ways to end this." "Such as?" Aurora turned to Castellano. "Give us everything. Every record, every piece of leverage you have on everyone in this city. Every secret operation, every compromised official, every dirty deal you've ever brokered. You give it all to Francesco and you leave. Tonight. You get on a plane to wherever people like you go when they've lost, and you never come back." Castellano laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "And if I refuse?" "Then Francesco kills you right here, and your organization collapses anyway when the authorities get anonymous tips about everything we found in your warehouse tonight. At least this way, you live, diminished, powerless, but alive." Francesco was watching her with an unreadable expression. Castellano looked between them, calculating odds, weighing options. Then his shoulders sagged in defeat. "I'll need 24 hours to compile everything." "You have 2, Francesco interrupted. "And you do it here, now, with my people watching. Any attempt to run, any attempt to destroy evidence, and Aurora's offer expires. Understood?" Castellano nodded slowly. The next 2 hours were surreal. They moved to a secure location, one of Francesco's properties that Aurora had never seen. And Castellano sat at a computer while Francesco's team watched over his shoulder. Files downloaded, passwords were surrendered. By the time dawn started lightening the sky, they had everything. Decades of Castellano's carefully constructed empire, laid bare and transferred into Francesco's possession. "Done," Castellano said finally, his voice hollow. "Everything you asked for. Now, let me go." Francesco studied the files on his own laptop, verifying what they'd received. Then he nodded to Luca. "Get him to the airport, international terminal. I don't care where he goes as long as it's not here." Luca escorted Castellano out. The man didn't look back, didn't make any final threats or promises. He just left, disappearing into the gray morning light like he'd never existed. Francesco's team dispersed after that, melting away with the same efficiency they'd arrived with. And then it was just Aurora and Francesco in the empty room, exhaustion settling over both of them like fog. "You stopped me from killing him," Francesco said quietly. "Yes." "Why?" Aurora thought about the answer, about what it would have meant to watch Francesco pull that trigger, to see him cross that line, about the weight he would have carried afterward. "Because you're not a killer," she said finally. "You're someone who operates in gray areas, who does difficult things to maintain balance. But actually taking a life, executing someone in cold blood, that would have changed you. And I didn't want to be responsible for that change." Francesco was silent for a long moment. Then he set down his laptop and looked at her directly for the first time since they'd left his office hours ago. "You saved his life to protect mine," he said. "To protect who I am." "Yes." "Even though I told you we were done after tonight, even though you knew it wouldn't change anything between us." "Yes," Aurora repeated, her throat tight. "Because you matter to me, Francesco. Who you are matters. And I won't let anyone, including me, turn you into something you're not." Francesco closed his eyes, and Aurora saw the exhaustion in every line of his body, the weight of the night. The toll of months spent managing impossible situations and maintaining control when everything wanted to fracture. "I don't know how to forgive you," he said quietly. "I don't know how to let go of the anger or trust you again or any of the things that would be necessary to make this work. I know. But I also don't know how to let you walk away. Because somewhere in the middle of all this chaos, you became the only person I wanted standing next to me when things got hard. And tonight, when everything went to hell, you were exactly who I needed you to be." Aurora's heart was hammering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm tired of pretending I don't care. Tired of holding on to anger because it's safer than admitting I still want you despite everything." Francesco opened his eyes, and Aurora saw the war still happening there. Hurt battling with hope, fear fighting against need. I'm saying that if you want to try again, really try, then we do it differently this time. No more secrets. No more making decisions alone when we should be making them together. And no more running when things get complicated. I'm not running, Aurora said, moving closer. I'm done running. From you, from Castellano, from this world you live in that terrified me, but also made me feel more alive than I've ever felt. I want in, Francesco, all the way in, not as your consultant or your liability or your problem to solve, as your partner in everything. Francesco's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence of the past few hours. Partners means equals. It means you get a say in dangerous decisions, and I don't get to lock you in a tower every time someone threatens you. I can live with that. It also means you accept that my world is never going to be completely safe, that there will always be people like Castellano who see you as leverage, that being with me puts a target on your back that never completely goes away. I know. And you still want this? Aurora thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago. Thought about the careful, controlled life she'd built where everything was predictable and safe and ultimately hollow. Thought about the woman she'd become in Francesco's orbit, scared and exhilarated and pushed to her absolute limits. I want you, she said simply. However that comes, whatever that costs. I want you. Francesco kissed her then, slow and deep and full of everything they'd been denying for days. Aurora melted into him, feeling the tension drain from both their bodies, as something that had been broken slowly started to knit itself back together. When they finally broke apart, Francesco rested his forehead against hers. This isn't going to be easy, he said. Nothing worth having ever is. I'm still angry about some of it. I know, I'm angry at myself too. And we have a lot to work through before I fully trust you again. Then we work through it, together, for however long it takes. Francesco pulled back enough to meet her eyes. Okay then, together. But Aurora? Yes? Next time someone threatens your family, you come to me first. Not after you've already made a deal with them. Not when there's no other option. First. Understood? Understood. Good. Now let's get you home. You look like you're about to collapse. Aurora let Francesco drive her back to her apartment as the city woke around them. Luca had already cleared out, called off the security detail now that Castellano was no longer a threat. It was just her and Francesco, exhaustion and relief mixing together in the quiet car. At her building, Francesco walked her to her door. Aurora unlocked it, then turned back to him. Stay, she said. Please, just for a few hours. I don't want to be alone right now. Francesco studied her face, then nodded. Okay. They collapsed on Aurora's couch, still wearing body armor and exhaustion. Francesco pulled her against his chest, and Aurora listened to his heartbeat, steady and strong and real. This was what she'd been missing, this simple closeness, this certainty that she wasn't facing the world alone. I should call Marcus, Aurora murmured. Let him know he's safe. I already did, while you were in the conference room trying to sleep. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. He made me promise to bring you to dinner once this was over so he could verify you're actually okay. Aurora smiled against Francesco's shoulder. He worries. He cares about you. That makes him smart. They drifted off like that, tangled together on Aurora's worn couch as the morning sun painted gold across her apartment. When Aurora woke hours later, Francesco was still there, still holding her like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. Hi, she said softly. Hi. Francesco's hand traced patterns on her back. How are you feeling? Like I just lived through the most intense night of my life. That's fair. Aurora sat up, wincing as muscles she'd forgotten she had protested. What happens now? With Castellano's files, his operations, all of it. Now I spend the next few months carefully distributing information to the right people. Some of it goes to law enforcement, the crimes that are too egregious to ignore. Some of it goes to Castellano's former associates, letting them know his protection is gone and they're on their own. And some of it I keep, because information is currency in my world, and he just handed me a fortune. That's going to make you very powerful. More powerful, Francesco corrected, which comes with its own complications. More people looking to me for favors, more obligations, more weight. He looked at her seriously. Are you sure you want to be part of that? Because it's not too late to choose a different path. I'd understand if you wanted to walk away from all of this and go back to your normal life. Aurora thought about it. Really thought about it. About returning to Chen Romano Consulting. About coffee with Marcus and client meetings and the safe, predictable routine she'd built. About never again feeling the terror and exhilaration of standing next to Francesco as the world burned around them. I don't think I have a normal life to go back to, she said honestly. I think the moment I walked into your office 6 months ago, that version of me started dying. And after tonight, after everything we've been through, she's gone completely. So the question isn't whether I want your world. It's whether you want me in it, knowing I'm still learning the rules, and I'm probably going to make more mistakes. Francesco pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. I want you exactly as you are. Mistakes and all. The weeks that followed were strange. Aurora returned to work at Chen Romano Consulting, but she and Francesco restructured their professional relationship completely. She became his true partner, not just in business, but in the careful management of his various operations. He taught her how to read between the lines of contracts, how to identify which associates were trustworthy and which were looking for weakness. She learned the language of his world slowly, with Francesco as her patient translator. Marcus noticed the change immediately. The next time Aurora came to the office, he took one look at her face and smiled. You got him back, he said. More like we got each other back. Different, but back. I'm happy for you. Terrified for your safety, but happy. That seems to be the general consensus. They lost some clients who were uncomfortable with Aurora's relationship with Francesco, gained others who saw her connection to him as valuable access. Chen Romano Consulting shifted, evolved, became something new that reflected Aurora's dual life. Francesco kept his promise about honesty. He told her things he'd never told anyone, about his father's death, about the weight of inheriting an empire built on moral ambiguity, about the loneliness of being the person everyone relied on, but no one truly knew. And Aurora told him about her own fears, her own doubts, the ways she struggled to reconcile who she'd been with, who she was becoming. 3 months after the night they destroyed Castellano, Francesco appeared at Aurora's apartment with a key. What's this? She asked. To the penthouse. I want you to move in. Aurora stared at the key, at the symbol of permanence it represented. That's a big step. I know. And if you're not ready, I understand. But I want you there, Kara. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep with you every night. I want all of it, not just the parts that fit into convenient schedules. Aurora thought about her apartment, the place she'd lived alone for 5 years, the safe haven she'd built when the world felt too overwhelming. Thought about leaving it behind for Francesco's penthouse, for a life lived in the heights above the city they'd both claimed. Okay, she said, taking the key. But I'm bringing my furniture. Your place is beautiful, but it's also incredibly impersonal. It needs actual personality. Francesco laughed, the real laugh that she'd learned to treasure because he saved it just for her. Deal. Bring whatever you want. Make it yours. Aurora moved in over the course of 2 weeks, bringing pieces of herself into Francesco's carefully curated space. Books and art and the worn couch they'd first collapsed on together. Francesco complained about the aesthetic clash, but she caught him smiling when he thought she wasn't looking, pleased to have evidence of her presence everywhere he turned. They built a life together in increments. Quiet mornings drinking coffee, while Francesco worked through correspondence. Late nights debriefing after difficult meetings. Dinners with Marcus, where Francesco and her business partner developed a grudging mutual respect. Aurora met more of Francesco's associates, learned to navigate the complex social dynamics of his world with growing confidence. It wasn't perfect. They fought sometimes, about Aurora taking unnecessary risks, about Francesco making decisions without consulting her, about the fundamental differences in how they'd been raised to view the world. But they fought honestly, and they always came back to each other afterward, recognizing that the friction was part of what made them work. 6 months after moving in together, Aurora woke to find Francesco already awake, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked, self-conscious. Nothing, just thinking. About? About how my life was completely different a year ago. How I was different. Controlled and isolated and convinced that was the only way to be safe. Francesco's hand came up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. And then you walked into my office with your laptop and your coffee and your complete inability to be intimidated by me, and everything changed. Sounds dramatic when you put it that way. It was dramatic. You were dramatic. You are dramatic. But he was smiling, and I wouldn't change any of it. Not the chaos or the fear or even the parts where I thought I'd lost you, because it all led here. To this. To us. Aurora kissed him, slow and sweet and full of everything she'd learned about love in the past year. That it was messy and complicated and sometimes terrifying. That it required trust even when trust felt impossible. That it meant choosing someone over and over, even when walking away seemed easier. I love you, she said against his mouth. Even though you're controlling and paranoid and you have terrible taste in furniture, I love you too. Even though you're reckless and stubborn and you reorganized my entire filing system without asking. It needed reorganizing. It was perfect the way it was. It was chaos masquerading as order. Francesco pulled her closer, and Aurora felt the tension drain from both their bodies as the familiar argument dissolved into familiar affection. This was their rhythm now. Push and pull, challenge and surrender. Two people from completely different worlds learning to build something new in the space between. Later that morning, Francesco had a meeting with some of his associates. Aurora attended, something she did regularly now, serving as his partner in ways that went far beyond consulting. The men around the table had learned to respect her presence, had seen her prove herself in the months since Castellano's fall. The Harbor District property finally closed, one of them reported. Exactly at the price you predicted, Ms. Romano. Good, Aurora said, reviewing the contract. And the Rotterdam situation? Stabilized. The contracts that Castellano compromised have been renegotiated. We're actually in a better position than before. Francesco squeezed Aurora's hand under the table, a small gesture of appreciation that no one else could see. She squeezed back, feeling the weight of partnership in that simple contact. When the meeting ended and they were alone again, Francesco pulled her into his arms. You were incredible in there, he said. I'm learning from the best. No, you're becoming the best. There's a difference. Aurora rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Do you ever regret it? Letting me into your world? All the complications that came with it? Never. Not even when I betrayed you? Francesco was quiet for a moment. That hurt. More than almost anything has hurt in my life. But it also taught me something important. What? That love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about choosing to stay even after mistakes are made. About fighting to rebuild instead of walking away when things get hard. His arms tightened around her. You made a terrible choice out of fear, but you also made an incredible choice when you came back, when you asked me to help you end Castellano. That took more courage than I think you realize. I was terrified you'd say no. I almost did. I was so angry that saying yes felt like admitting weakness. What changed your mind? Francesco pulled back enough to meet her eyes. You did. The fact that you came to me despite knowing I hated you, despite having no guarantee I'd help. You chose to trust me when trust was the hardest thing in the world. And I realized that if you could be that brave, then I could be brave enough to forgive. Tears burned behind Aurora's eyes. I don't deserve you. Good thing I'm not interested in what you deserve. I'm interested in what we build together. That night they had dinner with Aurora's mother. She'd been moved to a better facility, one that Francesco had quietly arranged and funded. Her dementia meant she didn't always recognize Aurora, but on her good days she'd smile and ask about that nice young man with the accent. He's still around, Mom, Aurora said, squeezing her mother's hand. Still putting up with me. That's good. You need someone who can handle you. You've always been too strong for your own good. Aurora glanced at Francesco, who was watching the interaction with gentle amusement. She's not wrong, he murmured. After the visit, driving home through the city they both loved and fought for, Aurora felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or acceptance. The understanding that her life would never be simple or safe or predictable, but it would be hers, fully, completely hers, in ways it had never been when she'd been trying to control every variable. What are you thinking? Francesco asked, noticing her expression. That I'm happy, despite everything. Despite the danger and the complications and the fact that I'm dating someone who literally took down a criminal empire because he was angry at how they treated me. I'm happy. Good. Because I plan on making you even happier. Oh? How? Francesco pulled into their building's garage, parked, but didn't get out of the car. Instead, he turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Marry me, he said. Aurora's heart stopped. What? Marry me, Aurora. Not because it's expected or because it makes sense strategically, but because I want to spend the rest of my life arguing with you about furniture and watching you reorganize things that don't need reorganizing and waking up next to you every single morning. Marry me because I love you and I choose you and I want the world to know you're mine the same way I'm yours. Aurora stared at him, her mind spinning. This was insane. They'd been together less than a year. They'd spent a significant portion of that time either fighting or recovering from near disasters. By any rational measure, they should wait, should be sure, should have at least one calm year before making this kind of commitment. Yes, she heard herself say. Francesco blinked. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Because you're right. This isn't about what's rational or expected or strategically sound. It's about the fact that I can't imagine my life without you in it. Can't imagine facing anything, good or bad, without you beside me. So yes, absolutely yes. Francesco pulled a ring from his pocket. Simple, elegant, nothing like the ostentatious pieces Aurora had seen other women in his world wear. It was perfect. He slid it onto her finger, and Aurora felt the weight of it like a promise. When? She asked. Whenever you want. Big wedding, if that's what makes you happy. Small ceremony, if you'd prefer. I don't care about the details as long as the ending is you becoming my wife. Aurora thought about it. About the spectacle of a large wedding. About navigating Francesco's world while planning something that would inevitably become a social event. About the simplicity of something small and private, just them and the people who mattered most. Small, she decided. Soon. I don't want to wait. Neither do I. They were married 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at the waterfront property Francesco had fought so hard to acquire. Marcus stood as Aurora's witness. Sophia, the scarred woman from Francesco's team, who'd become an unexpected friend, stood as his. There were fewer than 20 people present, but they were the people who mattered. The people who'd stood by them through chaos and conflict and the complicated process of building something real. Aurora wore a simple white dress. Francesco wore his usual dark suit, and when they exchanged vows, promises about trust and partnership and choosing each other even when it was hard, Aurora felt the last pieces of her old life finally fall away. She was Aurora Vitelli now, partner to a man who operated in shadows but loved with startling intensity. Part of a world she'd once feared but now navigated with growing confidence. And somehow, impossibly, happy in ways she'd never imagined when she'd walked into Francesco's office a year ago with a laptop full of analysis and no idea her entire life was about to change. The reception was small but perfect. Good food, better wine, and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilariously inappropriate. Marcus told embarrassing stories about Aurora's college days. Sophia shared carefully edited anecdotes about Francesco that made him laugh despite his protests. And when the night wound down and everyone drifted away, Aurora and Francesco stood on the waterfront watching the city lights reflect off dark water. No regrets? Francesco asked, pulling her against his side. Not a single one. Even though this means you're stuck with me forever? Especially because of that. Francesco kissed her temple. What do you think happens next? Next we live, we work, we fight sometimes and make up other times. We build something together that's bigger than either of us alone. And we do it all knowing that whatever comes, we face it as partners. That sounds perfect. It sounds complicated. Same thing, Francesco said, and Aurora heard the smile in his voice. They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, and the quiet certainty that whatever challenges the future held, they'd handle them the way they'd handled everything else. Together, imperfectly, but with absolute commitment to the life they'd chosen. 6 months into marriage, Aurora discovered she was pregnant. The news sent Francesco into a protective spiral that Aurora had to actively manage, reminding him that pregnancy wasn't a terminal illness, and she was fully capable of continuing to work and live her life. But underneath his overprotectiveness, she saw wonder, fear, hope for a future they were building together. Their daughter was born on a rainy April morning, screaming her displeasure at the world with impressive volume. Francesco held her with shaking hands, looking at the tiny person they'd created with an expression of absolute awe. "She's perfect," he breathed. "She's wrinkly and angry," Aurora said, exhausted and exhilarated. "But yes, she's perfect." They named her Isabella, after Francesco's grandmother, a woman who'd apparently been legendary for her strength and refusal to be intimidated by anyone. It felt fitting. Raising a child in Francesco's world required adjustments, more security, more careful vetting of anyone who came into contact with their family. But it also brought unexpected joy. Watching Francesco, a man who controlled empires and brokered deals worth millions, reduced to complete helplessness by a 6-pound infant, was both hilarious and deeply touching. "I don't know what to do when she cries," he admitted one night, holding Isabella while she wailed inconsolably. "Join the club. Nobody knows what to do when babies cry. You just keep trying things until something works." That's terrible advice. It's honest advice. Eventually, Isabella fell asleep against Francesco's chest, her tiny hand fisted in his shirt. Aurora watched him look down at their daughter with such profound tenderness that her heart ached. "You're going to be a good father," she said quietly. "I'm going to try. That's all I can promise. That's all anyone can promise." The years that followed were full of joy and challenge and the constant work of balancing Francesco's world with the family they were building. Isabella grew into a fierce, brilliant child who inherited her father's intensity and her mother's stubbornness. Chen Romano Consulting continued to thrive, with Aurora managing it alongside her partnership with Francesco. Marcus eventually met someone, a lawyer who thought his stories about Aurora's dramatic life were exaggerated until she met Francesco and realized they weren't. On their 5th anniversary, Francesco and Aurora returned to the waterfront property where they'd been married. Isabella was with Marcus and his partner for the weekend, giving them rare time alone. 5 years, Aurora said, looking out at the water. "Sometimes it feels like 5 minutes. Sometimes it feels like 5 lifetimes. Both can be true." Francesco wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if Paolo had never sent that text? If I'd never snapped and finally told you how I felt?" "Sometimes. But I don't think we would have stayed apart forever. I think we were always going to collide eventually. It was just a matter of when." "Inevitable, you think?" "Completely inevitable." Francesco turned her to face him. "I'm glad it happened when it did. Glad I didn't waste more time pretending I didn't want you. Even though it almost destroyed us? Even though. Because the alternative was never having this. Never having you. Never having Isabella. And I can't imagine that life anymore. Can't imagine being the person I was before you forced your way into my world and refused to leave." Aurora smiled. "I didn't force my way in. You pulled me in with your obsessive attention to detail and your completely inappropriate desk fantasies. They were very appropriate desk fantasies. And you know it." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the water. And standing there in the place where they'd promised forever to each other, Aurora understood something fundamental about love and choice and the strange paths that led people to exactly where they needed to be. She'd walked into Francesco Vitelli's office 18 months ago thinking she was just taking on another client. Instead, she'd found a partner, a challenge, a man who saw her completely and chose her anyway, who pushed her beyond every comfortable boundary and caught her when she fell, who built a life with her that was messy and complicated and absolutely, perfectly right. "What are you thinking?" Francesco asked, recognizing her thoughtful expression. "That I love you, that I'd choose this, choose you, 1,000 times over, knowing exactly how hard it would be." "Only 1,000? 1,000,000 then. Infinite choices, all leading here." Francesco kissed her as the sun set over the water, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And Aurora kissed him back, tasting promise and certainty and the absolute truth that whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys or complications the future held, they would face it together. Always together. Because that's what partnership meant, what love meant, what choosing someone every single day, even when it was hard, ultimately created. A life worth living. A story worth telling. A future built on trust and passion and the unshakable foundation of two people who'd found each other in the chaos and decided to stay. Forever.